Good evening, MMA fans. This is the Radulich Broadcasting Network TV Party Tonight Extra UFC Watch Along. We are currently giving you alternative commentary for UFC 241, the heavyweight rematch between Dan Cormier and Stipe Miocic. Joining me tonight on the broadcast and doing written 411 Mania coverage, so if he strokes out in the middle of this now, you know why. Ladies and gentlemen, my good friend and damn you Hollywood partner, Robert Winfree. How you doing tonight, Robert?
Oh, not too bad so far. You know, we're about 4 hours in, give or take, to this event, and coming into the home stretch. On the plus side, this is one of the most ridiculously stacked main cards we've had all year.
Yeah, let's break this down real quick. We've got the heavyweight title rematch, as I said before, between Cormier and Miocic. And then in your co-feature bout, you've got Anthony Showtime, I run across the cage like a ninja and kick people in the face, Pettis, versus MMA bad boy, but not quite as bad as his brother, Nate Diaz.
Nate did light up a joint during the open workouts.
Fan-fucking-tastic.
I figured you'd like that.
And one of my favorite fighters, I hope he doesn't test positive for gas after this, middleweight Soldier of God, Gawddd, Yoel Romero versus Paul Costa.
Okay, Paulo Costa, and let's be clear about this. Those two, if they were to just cross the metaphorical urine streams, they would melt through the concrete on the sidewalk. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Yoel Romero. I really do. He's great to watch. I love watching him fight. And he's had a grand total of like one pseudo issue with USADA about drug that he was able to definitively prove came from a tainted supplement. But you look at that man and just you got to know at some point in his career something wasn't right, because he's 42 and looks like he's carved out of marble. And then Paulo Costa, much younger man, but again, the definition on these two men is absurd. I'm not surprised by anyone failing drug tests in the world of MMA, but you look at those two, and if the eye test is a thing, and it really isn't, yeah, that's got some pretty serious hard body action going on.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're a fan of 80s professional wrestling, you're going to love that fight. Now, these next two here, Derek Brunson versus Ian Hynek.
Hynek.
And then Gabrielle Benitez. Go ahead.
You're not even going to try to pronounce Sodic Yusef?
There we go. Yeah, him. Derek Brunson I've heard of. But go ahead and fill me in on these first two main card bouts here. What's it all about?
The first fight, again, is between top-ranked competitors Derek Brunson and Ian Hynek. Hynek debuted on the UFC on the back of a win on Dana White's Contender Series. But he's on, I think, a 6-fight winning streak. He's 2-0 in the UFC, and both of those fights have been against relatively high-regarded opposition. He bested both Cesar Ferreira and Shoeface Antonio Carlos Jr. I don't say that disparagingly. It's literally the man's nickname.
Fair enough.
And both of those were, again, escalating levels of opposition. Cesar Ferreira has been a tough out in the UFC. Junior had only lost, I think, once in the UFC when he going into the Hynek fight. Was on a pretty significant winning streak and had a lot of momentum and a really marvelous jiu-jitsu game. And Hynek was able to gut through some tough spots in the first round, outgrind him. And I actually have picked officially Hynek to win that fight. But it's not a bad fight, all things considered, and Hynek is really kind of coming along, whereas I think Brunson might have plateaued. As for the other fight, our featherweight bout between Gabrielle Benitez and Sodic Yusef, this should not have been on the main card, in my estimation, especially over ranked bantamweights Corey Sandhagen and Rafael Assunção, who've put on what is so far the fight of the night. To anyone with a even remotely sophisticated fight palette, I imagine if you're a giant donk, you were just like, yeah, Drakkar Klose and crap, who'd he fight? Christos Yagos, just they threw leather at each other. I mean, sure, but
What about the fight?
As for the fight itself, Yusef's a guy the UFC. He's the second kind of explosive striker the UFC had on this card. The other one was the main event of the prelims, and he got knocked out in the first round. So, but he's a much more sophisticated striker than the gentleman in question, Devontae Smith. Yusef's a power puncher. He's got a decent volume of strikes. He's not bad about going to the body and head. He has very, very fast hands. Benitez has an overall UFC record of 5-2. He's a well-rounded guy, but he's kind of here because when he's taken a step up to a certain level of competition, he's stumbled. And this feels like the UFC is trying to get a fan-friendly prospect some exposure on a big pay-per-view main card in a friendly style. So, again, Benitez could upset the apple cart here. He's a talented fighter. Again, 5-2 in the UFC is nothing to sneeze at. But Yusef's a guy that they're trying to bring along in a specific way, and there's very clearly I hate to say there's clearly an agenda here, but there's an outcome that the UFC would prefer. And if that's not what they get, they'll just make do with what they have.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about your prelim action tonight. Now, at first blush, and again, I watched maybe a few minutes of the women's strawweight match between Hannah Cifers and Jodie Esquibel.
I am sorry.
Not
a good fight.
When I say watching it, I was mostly looking at my phone. But I missed the first two. I was doing other stuff. But again, at first blush, you've had a lot of decisions tonight, all but one, Kama Worthy versus Devontae Smith. So if you could just kind of in brief can talk about your night so far. You had 6 decisions and 1 first-round TKO, and you're telling me that the best match, though, was one of those decisions featuring Rafael Assunção and Corey Sandhagen. So just kind of sum that all up for me. What were some of the fights like? We talked in our pre-show meeting here that they all weren't the drizzling shits, and I shouldn't make fun of you because some of these were some real barn burners, but not a lot of finishes. So what's going on here?
Well, for the record, I maintain this stance. If you were to think of, and this includes you or anyone else listening, if you think of the 5 best fights in MMA history, how many of those went the distance?
Probably.
The answer's all of them.
Yeah, I was gonna say at least 3.
At 4, at least 4 of those 5 go. Fights that go the distance have time to develop.
Sure.
Now sometimes they suck. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but just because a fight has a finish doesn't mean it's good. Just because a fight goes the distance doesn't mean it's bad. As for the night so far, it's been about what you'd expect. Sabina Mazo and Shayna Dobson was decent. Mazo just buzzsawed through her for all 3 rounds. Kyung Ho Kong and Brandon Davis had a fun little back-and-forth scrap. Cifers and Esquibel, There's a 30-28 in there because the last round could legitimately be a 10-10, and I wouldn't complain about it.
Fair enough.
Casey Kenny and Manny Bermudez had some decent grappling exchanges. Again, not a whole lot there that's really memorable, but it wasn't bad. Drakkar Klose and Christos Yagos was your kind of roadhouse barn burner affair. Yagos just faded late as Klose kept pouring on offense and pressure, and again, not bad. Again, my fight of the night, Corey Sandhagen and Rafael Assunção. Sandhagen, a real up-and-comer in the bantamweight division. On a 4 or 5 fight winning streak, might be a little longer actually after this one, because he's now won, I think, 4 he's won 4 at bantamweight and 5 overall in the UFC, I believe. Because his debut was up at featherweight. He's on a much longer winning streak than that. He's on a 6 fight winning streak. He's 4. He's 5-0 in the UFC. So my apologies, 7 fight winning streak. 4 of those at bantamweight. He just beat the number 3 guy, and Rafael Assunção has stopped a lot of promising up-and-comers in their tracks over the years. So he's really rolling. He fights out of both stances very well, switches well, good offense, good pace, good on the feet, good in the clinch, fun scrambles on the ground. Those two had a lot of fun grappling exchanges. Again, my fight of the night. And then after that you had Again, the UFC is high on Devontae Smith because he finished a couple of guys on the Contender Series.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, a lot of the guys that come in, like Dana White's Contender Series, looks for two kinds of fighters primarily. One kind is the kind that is legitimately world-class, top of the heap, and just blows the doors off of everyone at the lower levels of opposition. The other is the big risk-takers who have flashy finishes. If you're just a really, really good, world-class fighter, but you don't stand out, it's not a good place for you. So Smith knocked out a scrub, made his way to the UFC, had a decent UFC debut, but he was like a 10-1 favorite in this fight, which was madness.
Okay, as we see the fighters starting their walkouts, quick remind the people what happened in 50 words or less, what happened in the initial Stipe Miocic-Dan Cormier fight, for those that may not remember it, or this is the first time they're listening to a UFC podcast.
Yeah, for the record, we're getting Hynek and Brunson walkouts. Cormier and Miocic first fought at UFC, I believe, 226. Let me double-check that. Yes. Cormier was the light heavyweight champion at the time. He moved up in weight and knocked out Stipe Miocic in the first round. The fight itself was competitive for as long as it lasted. Miocic had his jab working for a bit until he couldn't deal with the mummy guard of Cormier. Cormier found some success with his pressure. Miocic really wanted to get out of clinches very quickly. Cormier just was able to catch him with a short right hook exiting a clinch that Miocic never saw coming, dropped him, and finished him. And it is the ones you never see coming that hurt you, because Miocic's been hit in the head by Francis Ngannou and didn't fall over. So he's got a chin, but Cormier just caught him in a spot he wasn't expecting it, and became the second ever simultaneous two-weight world champion. He is currently the only two-weight – he's the first, not the only, the first two-weight world champion to successfully defend both titles he has held. He did not defend the light heavyweight title again after winning the heavyweight. It's actually one of the reasons Amanda Nunes wants to defend the featherweight title. She's not going to, because there is no division, because she would be the first double champ to successfully defend both titles while holding both titles.
Hang on,
but
didn't they just announce today that she's defending against Randamé?
Bantamweight, not featherweight.
Really?
Yes.
I thought Randamé was a featherweight.
Either. She's fought in both weight classes.
And she's going to fight at bantamweight?
Yeah.
Bizarre. Okay, go on.
Look, the UFC and Cyborg parted ways, a couple of weeks ago. There is no featherweight.
And much like Demetrius Johnson in the flyweight division, where the fighter goes, so goes the division.
Well, the UFC's at least kept up the pretense of flyweight for a while. I mean, they still have fights taking place in the division. They're still signing guys to contracts.
We'd have ended that division, but Henry Cejudo won't give us back the damn belt.
Pretty much.
All right, so here's my 50-cent analysis. You can tell me how wrong I am and what's really going to happen. But Dan Cormier, to me, is the superior fighter in all categories against Stipe Miocic. He's got good enough hands. He's obviously an elite Olympic-level wrestler, which is why I believe Stipe Miocic didn't really want to be touched in the clinch by Cormier, because he's going to get wrestled down and submitted or smothered and covered like oh so much hash browns. So Stipe Miocic pretty much has to rely on his striking, but as I said before, Dan Cormier is no slouch with his hands, and he's clearly got some power.
Cormier has power at heavyweight. His technique is, I think Jack Slack said it best, Daniel Cormier has given up being a conventional striker and just finds whatever works for him.
Well, like I said, I'm not sitting here saying that he's technically superior in the striking to Stipe Miocic. Hang on. The man has won fights but by knockout or TKO. So I'm not going to sit here and slight his ability to win a fight with strikes.
No, look, Daniel Cormier is one of the best to ever do it. There's no reasonable dispute on that point. But he does leave openings. He's a little soft to the body, and he doesn't defend it very well. He's also got some habits that are exploitable. And if Miocic can fight smart, and frankly, if Miocic decides to engage in the clinch a few more times instead of just try to get out of there as fast as possible, Cormier is willing to give up a lot of disadvantageous positions to maintain the clinch. And Miocic can wrestle as well. I mean, not to the same level necessarily, but well enough for MMA, and certainly well enough, again, once you start mixing in strikes and whatnot.
Well enough. First of all, what would fitness critic Scott Steiner say about Dan Cormier's body?
He's fat!
Thank you.
Even though, in fairness to Daniel Cormier, he and Stipe both weighed in about 10 pounds lighter than they did for their first fight for this one. They're both down around 230. So they're both favoring speed and longevity in the rematch rather than raw power.
All right, we are almost set to begin here with Derek Brunson and Ian, how are you pronouncing it? Heineken? Hynek. Got it. I'll only screw it up 2 more times.
I'm sure.
All right, so I want to go ahead and call the action here because I know you also have to follow what's happening pretty accurately. So I'll ask for your analysis in a little bit here as we begin with Mr. Derek Brunson versus Ian Hynek.
For the record, if you hear clacking, that is just my keyboard.
That's everybody I do podcasts with. There's either clacking of keyboards, barking of dogs, whining of children, or clanging of pots and pans. And here we go. And oh Jesus Christ, we open up with Roadhouse here as Aaron Hynek unloads with a series of strikes and then kicked him squaw in the head. And Derek Brunson puts a stop to it by putting Hynek in what I can only call a bear hug.
Brunson, while being a good wrestler, Brunson doesn't use it nearly as often as he should, and Hynek can grapple as well. So,
well, essentially what he did was clinch him, but I have to laugh because he picked him up off the ground, and Hynek didn't quite know what to do at that point, and so now he's being pressed up against the cage.
Well, if he didn't get taken down, that's relatively impressive.
I didn't think Brunson tried. It honestly just looked like an old pro wrestling bear hug there for a moment. Okay.
But, I mean, look, you get around their body, elevate them, get some motion going, sweep out the leg, get them. I mean, Khabib Nurmagomedov does variations of this all the time.
So Brunson separating, he launched a right. So now they're exchanging strikes in the center-ish of the cage. Brunson just kicked air, for seemingly no reason.
That's a lot of Derek Brunson fights. I watched and covered his last fight with Elias Theodorou and wanted to die. It's an awful fight. It got Theodorou cut from the promotion despite both being ranked in the top 15 and having a winning record.
All right, so Hynek is starting to score more strikes on Brunson than Brunson on Hynek, but none seem to have stunned him thus far, short of that kick from the beginning. What do you think of Hynek's striking so far? Because he's very aggressive, he's scoring hits, but I don't know if he's really protecting himself from a counter. I feel like he's... Brunson just nailed him back. I feel like he's reaching a bit and leaving himself open to retaliation.
Both of these guys reach a lot. Do me a favor. Watch Derek Brunson's chin as he strikes.
Okay.
He leans forward with it. It is literally the first part of his body facing his opponent half the time.
Hynek launched a kick. It was sort of caught with the shoulder and shrugged off. Tries for a leg kick. Doesn't do much there. Brunson sort of dancing on the outside now. I'm guessing he doesn't really want to deal with this guy's power, and he's going to play more of a defensive tactic, look for openings on the retaliation. And Hynek goes for a single leg, gets him nothing. Brunson gets away.
Yeah, again, neither of these guys are all that great defensively. Mm-hmm. That's part of the reason you're seeing some of the choices that are being made. Again, part of the reason neither of them is also very much of a counter striker. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're not going to see some sophisticated slipping and countering. You're not even going to see a lot of faking to draw out something and then look for a crisp counter, be that intercepting or after the fact.
Well, both of these guys have withstood some pretty powerful strikes, both in the hands and feet so far, and I'm wondering if they both sort of have the same idea, or at least Derek Brunson for sure does, which is, I'll take one to give one, and maybe when I give it, he'll fall down.
Well, Brunson has documented power, but again, a lot of his defensive technique is what's come back to bite him consistently when it comes to his fights.
So what I like about Brunson is he does kind of a hook, not a hook punch, but his footwork, he kind of hooks around. He's not backing straight up, whereas Hynek was backing straight up. Brunson just decided not to pursue him. And Brunson shoots for a single. He's got Hynek against the cage. He's pulling him off the cage now. We'll see if he's successful in executing the actual takedown. And nope, instead they're content to just trade strikes while he's got one leg up in the air.
Yeah, you're going to see a lot of that. Neither of these gentlemen is actually from Florida, but you get a Florida man vibe out of this fight.
I'm guessing you don't think these two are the most elite of fighters.
Well, no, they're both very good, but but that doesn't stop them from having habits and tendencies that are obvious in some fights.
Aggression makes us all a little sloppy.
And, fatigue makes cowards of men as well, so.
Yeah, both of these guys are fairly muscular, which then draws the question how much gas do they have in their tank. Granted, it's only a 3-round fight. Interesting feint there. I don't particularly enjoy the. I guess he was trying to shoot, but I hate it when fighters sort of bend over at the waist like that.
If you're going to do it, you really got to do it and commit quickly.
Yeah. All right, this time he shoots for a double. Hynek goes right back into the cage again. Hynek's doing a very good job of defending the takedown. I don't think Brunson's had a successful one yet.
And Brunson's a very good MMA wrestler. Hynek is a really tough grappler as far as that goes.
So I'm wondering if the corner's now going to tell him, hey, why don't you, look for something as he defends the takedown. That might be where the openings are.
Well, I'm sure the cornerman will bring that up, but I'm not sure either man will actually be able to implement that. There's not a lot of smooth transition from area to area from either guy. If Brunson's in striking mode, he's in striking mode. If he's in wrestling mode, he's in wrestling mode.
I'll tell you what, though, if I'm his corner, that's what I'm telling him to, because what I noticed with Hynek during that first round is that that Brunson did on a couple of occasions was able to land some strikes in the midst of separating off a failed takedown.
Oh, it's one of the areas in the entire sport that gets overlooked, is the ability to land when you're exiting the pocket, when you're exiting the clinching, and that's where Stipe got caught. It's where a lot of really good fighters will get clipped because they're just hands aren't coming back in proper position. They're worried about something that's not coming. Or they're just tired and don't want to have their hands up.
All right, here we go with round 2. Fighters meet in the center of the octagon. Let me begin with a series of kicks from Derek Brunson. Not tremendously effective.
Yeah, boy, these two guys are kind of sucking wind already. That was, in fairness, that was a furious pace for a first round.
Sure. I'm wondering if he's using these sort of dainty, sort of half-committal kicks to keep him at distance. He really doesn't seem to want Hynek to fight inside, because that's where Hynek was the most successful.
Well, and Brunson's infighting is not that good to begin with. He does his best work either at distance, where he can kind of explode through distance and catch you with something, or all the way in close when he's just straight up trying to grapple you to death. So if he's worried about boxing range in particular, he's gonna try to keep Hynek at that distance.
When Hynek goes for a single, goes nowhere, tries to end the series with a knee, which is not tremendously effective. We had some exchanges there against the cage. Brunson was fairly successful. Hynek went for a takedown, and Brunson did the old dick in the dirt sprawl.
Hey, if they can't get their hands around your hips, they have a real hard time taking you down.
Indeed.
You can see Brunson when he strikes. He is still lunging, and again, just watch his chin. It comes forward. There's a reason Robert Whittaker was able to just dissect him so much every time he came forward in their fight, and he hasn't really addressed the problem from a mechanical standpoint.
Where does this, if the winner of this, where does this leave them in the rankings? Does it get them in orbit of any kind of a title shot with Whittaker, or get them close?
We got Whittaker and Adesanya coming up. You've got Yoel Romero and Paulo Costa is probably more a fight for the title orbit, and there's somebody else whose name I'm forgetting off the top of my head at the moment. I will look up.
So maybe the winner of this just gets another name, and maybe another UFC, either a fight night main event or something.
Now, you're going to take another step towards the title picture, and I mean, if you're Brunson, a loss here is pretty devastating because while he is coming off of a win, he's something like 3-4 in his last 7. So he's lost more than he's won recently.
Maybe he goes to Bellator next. Or
I think the UFC will keep him around for a little bit longer, but
there were like 3 simultaneous MMA cards today on, I think, the Fight app from around the world, and I think might have been one on DAZN, or that's next weekend rather. In any case, back to the action. Not a whole lot going on while we were talking there. Brunson's pursuing Hynek now. So that's the second time I've seen Brunson squarely hit him in the face, and immediately Hynek reacted by going for a takedown. And now Brunson lights up his face and takes his back. They're standing, but he's got his back.
Yeah, Hynek is a tough guy, but again, Brunson has some pretty well-documented power, and you don't want to engage with that on his terms.
Not sure if shooting for a takedown when you're being punched is the best option as far as defense goes, or retaliation. Countering, I should say.
I think the best example of how to deal with Brunson when he's being that successful, again, some of it comes from Robert Whittaker, who just is the best middleweight in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Jacare had a lot of success against him, but he was also afraid of fighting Jacare again.
Sure.
So he fought very differently, but
there's a failed knee strike from Hynek. Brunson's coming. Oh, Jesus. So Brunson threw a kick and slipped, fell on his butt, and now Hynek is in pursuit. Brunson recovers pretty well, though. Yeah, Hynek is sucking wind. He's dropping his hands. He's breathing pretty heavy.
He's eaten some pretty hefty body kicks this round as well, which is a nice adjustment from Brunson. If he's not worried about being taken down, throw it and put some power behind it.
Oh, who'd you give the first round to? Hynek?
Slightly to Hynek.
Okay. This one I'm leaning, as we are down to almost our last 30 seconds, unless something radical happens in the next 30 seconds, I'm giving it to Brunson.
Yeah, this has been a much better round for Derek Brunson. He's avoided some of Hynek's bum rushes. He's picked at him at distance. Mm-hmm. He's the one who's had more success when it comes to either the striking and the grappling.
Okay. We've got another takedown attempt by Hynek, and he's suffering for it because Brunson defended, almost nearly tipped him over, and then landed a bunch of strikes to the face. So Hynek very, very, very good at escaping these takedown attempts or these pressure against the cage.
Yeah, the other thing that Hynek is struggling with a little bit is the footwork of Brunson. And Brunson does not have great footwork, but by comparison, he's having a lot of success here.
Yes, he is. I don't particularly like Hynek's footwork, by which I say he has almost none. I don't like the way he backs up when taking a pounding. I don't really like the way he sets up his striking. He's definitely, there's a lot of waist and arms in there when he's striking, not a whole lot of dynamic footwork.
Yeah, I agree with you again. Hynek doesn't even have a lot of very good offensive footwork. I'm a little more forgiving of bad defensive footwork, especially amongst developing fighters, because depending on the level of opposition, you don't need it necessarily. But when you get to the elite level, you do.
Oh, look who it is. It's Colby Covington. And he brought his belt with him like a bar patron.
Good for him.
And his MAGA hat. Oh, aren't you adorable?
Hey, look, Colby's about 70% gimmick, but it's working. He's going to get the next title shot.
Oh, he's like an interim champion, isn't he?
No.
They
stripped him of that a while ago. He just still has the belt and takes it with him.
Okay, got it. Good to know pro wrestling is alive and well in professional MMA. All right, as we begin our third and final round here, Hynek seems to have gotten some life back in him. I see some feinting with the arms. He's moving pretty quickly.
That'll last for about 90 seconds. I don't mean that disparagingly, but when you see guys who suck wind settle on the fence, and unless they really hit their second wind, you got about 2 minutes if you're lucky before their arms and legs are let again.
And we have our first successful takedown of the fight. Derek Brunson scooped up Hynek, took him down, wasn't able to do anything with it, and Hynek escaped immediately. Derek Brunson ties him up, drives him to the fence. I think if you're Eric Brunson at this point and you know you got that second round, just needing to control the fight, don't create too many openings for yourself, don't make too many mistakes. I mean, if something presents itself, obviously you should be aggressive and go for it. But I mean, I think at this point, if he can stop Hynek from committing to these aggressive attacks, he's probably got this one in the bag. As we see them square off again, Hynek is starting to back Brunson. But what I like about Brunson, as I said, is that he doesn't just go straight back. He circles around. And he landed a good left there on the chin of Hynek.
And that's Brunson's money punch, is his left.
And Hynek goes for a single. Brunson sprawls. He gets nothing. They're back standing again. Hynek, his defensive wrestling has been pretty spectacular, but his offensive wrestling against Brunson has not gotten him any yardage whatsoever. And Brunson takes him down again.
Brunson has good wrestling. Again, he out-wrestled for a significant period of the fight, his bout with Yoel Romero, before he just gassed and Romero beasted on him in the third round and got the stoppage.
Not able to keep him down or do anything towards a submission with Hynek. Hynek, I think, tried to reverse the takedown against the cage, and Brunson escaped. And they're standing again, trading some arm punches, and they're clinched. Yeah, both of these guys are exhausted. Good elbow there from Hynek, though. The right side of Hynek's face is taking a pretty good beating. His nose looks a little disjointed. I think his eye's starting to blacken. Good counterpunch there from Derek Brunson. Keep your hands up, Hynek.
Yeah, his shoulders are dead. He can't. He knows better, but he can't do it.
No, and I realize that this is exhaustion taking over, but it just pains me to watch.
Well, and again, the lack of proper technique in a lot of these situations aids in the fatigue factor.
And he just walked into a knee from Brunson. We're throwing arm punches at this point. We're just hoping something connects and maybe hits the temple or something.
Yeah, there's not a lot behind these. They're just kind of winging them out there.
Mm-hmm. Even when Brunson threw that knee a few seconds ago, there wasn't a tremendous amount of power behind it. Just the inherent power he has in his legs and his hips.
Yeah, it's all muscle. It's not a lot of proper body mechanics.
Yeah.
And again, when you get this tired, I mean, God bless you for having the energy to throw half this stuff, much less do it properly.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I mean, all the credit in the world to these guys. They're obviously some pretty good athletes, but yeah, they're both falling apart here. The end of this 15 minutes, they're both sapped, and they're just trying to get to the end, trying to not make a devastating mistake and get finished. We have less than 30 seconds to go here in this middleweight battle between Derek Brunson and Ian Hynek.
A really much more tactical performance from Brunson this time. Again, he's really struggled to find the happy medium wherein he's capitalizing on his power and his explosiveness, but he's not reckless.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also trying not to be too gun-shy because, again, he's been finished. I think most of his losses are finishes. I know Romero finished him, Whitaker finished him, Jacare finished him. So again, he's been trying to find that right balance for a while, and this is kind of the right balance, but unfortunately he's also still displaying certain habits and tendencies that really need to be addressed.
How are we handling from a judge's standpoint the takedown? Because he had a series of ineffective takedowns. We're in there where he completed the takedown, but he didn't hold him there. Hynek escaped immediately, that sort of thing. Are these still, how do judges score them these days? Because I would give that last round to Brunson, by the way.
As do I. I think he won the round, but do they score? Yeah, they score. The question, again, and sadly, there's just a ton of subjectivity in judging in general. Hence, 30-27 for Canelo. So again, they do score, they do matter, but an unsecured takedown, that especially one that leads to nothing, to me is worth and this is not an exact science, but it's worth, a couple of jabs kind of thing.
Okay, and we have our scores here. I'm going to go ahead and pitch it to you, Robert. Read us off the scores here and tell us who won.
Derek Brunson wins via unanimous decision, 29-28 across the board. I imagine they scored it like we did, with Hynek getting the first, Brunson rounds 2 and 3. No real controversy there, and the crowd seemed to enjoy it. So, but it's Los Angeles, and yeah, I'm not gonna really hold back about this one. Yeah. We see a few celebrities in attendance. For God's sake, they drug out Chuck Liddell from the old folks' home. That's just sad.
All right, so next up, as we were saying before, Gabrielle Benitez versus Sodic Yusef. Give us some analysis here. What can we expect from this fight?
Well, Benitez, if he's smart, is going to try and both push a high pace and force constant grappling exchanges. Yusef, a bit of a physical specimen, again, very, very fast hands, power, in addition to just, being able to punch fast. And I expect a relatively high-paced affair here, and this is going to come down to whether or not Yusef can actually find a good spot for his punches, or how much his takedown defense is going to really consistently hold up. I mean, if you don't get the flash, kind of the early flash knockout, who has the better discipline is going to become a big factor for this one as well.
So let's talk a little bit about tonight's welterweight battle, which surprised me because Nate Diaz has floated between lightweight and welterweight a few different times, but I thought Anthony Pettis was traditionally a lightweight fighter. What's he doing at welterweight?
Making money.
I mean, this. Want to expound upon that just a bit?
Well, okay. Let's start with just the recent history of Anthony Pettis, then, shall we? First of all, the man has not won 2 fights in a row since he was lightweight champion. That was back in 2016.
Okay.
14, excuse me. So he hasn't won consecutive fights in 5 years. He lost 3 fights in a row at one point. He dropped to featherweight. That didn't go well. I mean, he beat Charles Oliveira, and then Max Holloway just brutalized him. He moves back to lightweight, and he's had some pretty rough fights. He beats Jim Miller, gets in just a bloody war with Dustin Poirier that he loses via body triangle submission. Which is it's rare, but it's nasty when it happens. Poirier just kept a tight body triangle, transitioning from the back to the mount, and it just puts horrible pressure on your spine and ribs. He beat Michael Chiesa, looked pretty good. Fought Tony Ferguson and got cut to pieces because Tony Ferguson. He is the boogeyman. Then after, lightweight, he could still win, but he's getting in these wars, and he's not really going to get back into the title picture fighting the lightweight rank and file. Poirier's about to fight for the belt later. Ferguson should be fighting for the belt. He can't beat Khabib. That's just the worst matchup possible for him stylistically. So he moves up to welterweight to fight Stephen Thompson. Gets pieced up for, 9 minutes and 54 seconds. Not to say he didn't have some success, but he got jabbed up, he got kicked up, and then he lands a Superman punch, knocks out Wonder Boy. And now he's fighting here, and, the reality is the ramifications for this fight are not at welterweight. Diaz is not fighting at welterweight unless it's another McGregor fight for some reason. It's not his ideal weight class. And it's full of guys who are terrible matchups for him. Pettis is a bit small for the division, and it's full of guys who are terrible matchups for him. I mean, when was the last time Anthony Pettis actually had a modicum of sustained success against a relentless, close proximity, tough, grindy wrestler?
So, I mean, Diaz, look, he's a money-weight fighter at this point, and I don't necessarily mean, he's a super big, money draw, but more on the line.
I mean, he is one of the bigger draws for the UFC. But
no, and what I was going with was he's a name fighter. He's a guy that you can stick on a card and people know who he is. People will be interested in whatever it is he's doing in whatever weight class, and that's all well and good. And so, to say, well, what do you do after this? Anything he damn well wants that they're willing to do with him. Fine. Diaz is an easy one. Pettis, on the other hand, especially the way you're describing it, it doesn't sound like he has much of a future in the sport.
I don't think he's going to be around all that. I mean, look, he wants to keep fighting, sure, and I'm not here to say he can't keep fighting. He just knocked out Stephen Thompson. But if you look at his career, he's had a very odd career trajectory. If you look at the amount of damage he's taken, and let's just limit this to in the cage. Let's forget the out-of-cage injuries, okay? Let's set that aside for just a minute. His last fight, again, he got kind of jabbed up, and his face was busted up before he won. Tony Ferguson, again, cut him to ribbons and forced a corner stoppage between rounds 2 and 3. I mean, Pettis broke his hand in that fight, and he was done after the second round of that fight. You could see it on the stool. He's sitting there, his head's down, his posture's crap. He tells Duke Roufus, "My hand's broken," and Duke asks him, "Do you want out? And can you fight with can you work around the broken hand?" "My hand's broken." All right. And Duke then tells him, "Okay, if you can't throw that hand, I can't have you fighting this guy." And he just kind of reiterates, "No, my hand's busted." All right, and Duke Roufus, to his eternal credit, not enough cornermen in MMA stop fights. He said, "That's it, we're stopping it."
Good.
So, brutal fight. The Poirier fight is a brutal fight. The Max Holloway fight, he got abused. Edson Barboza did a pretty decent number on him, to say nothing of what Rafael dos Anjos did. So in the last, 4 years, he's taken a lot of damage in the cage. Now, again, I'm not calling for him to retire by any stretch of the imagination. But it would be one of the truly spectacular fighter career turnarounds if he's able to really make a run at a belt in any division at this point. He wants to fight in high-profile situations and get paid. And I don't begrudge him one bit, mind you. But that's kind of what he's trying to do at this point, rather than, I'd really like to fight Khabib. Yeah, bull.
Would he not be better off after this fight? I don't know how many fights he's got on his contract or whatever, but when he fulfills his contractual obligations with the UFC, however he does that, if he's still in one piece and he still wants to fight, I'm not wondering if he shouldn't say, it's been a career, thank you UFC, part ways, and go see what money he can rob Bellator for.
That's very likely in his future if Bellator's still around at that point.
They've got a card coming up. They've got, what's his face? Meathead versus
Matt Mitrione.
Yeah.
Again, you see a little bit here in this preview for what Sodic Yusef can do, what he's able to do with his hand speed. Again, this is not a guy to sleep on. They're high on him for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And again, he's young in the sport. He's only like 9-1, I think. Yeah, 9-1. So there's still some maturation that's going to have to happen for him. But again, you can kind of tell why they put him in this position. Also, I don't know, man. I wonder if the UFC is not going to try to run something in some part of like West Africa in the near future, if they can find a politically stable enough country.
I don't know. See why. South Africa has.
I did say West Africa for a reason.
Okay, got it. You did say West Africa. I missed that part.
And I only bring that up because they have Kamaru Usman, who's Nigerian,
mm-hmm.
and is the welterweight champion. You have Israel Adesanya, who's born in Nigeria and raised mostly in New Zealand, who is the interim middleweight champion, and I genuinely can't wait for him and Robert Whittaker. That is going to be awesome.
Has there been an Olympics anywhere in Africa?
Yeah.
Or a World Cup, or
I think they've done. They might have done a few World Cups, and again, I think South Africa. Like, if you get above the Sahara, there's probably been a few things done in places like, parts of Egypt, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go into South Africa, again, South Africa, for all the troubles it had for a long period of time after the Boer War, there wasn't a lot of massive instability, even when they had the big, political shift in their country when they elected Nelson Mandela and you went through all that. It was a very, relative to how power normally transitions in situations like that, extremely smooth transition of power. So there are places in Africa that have the infrastructure to do it, but not a lot of them, especially given how big Africa's a huge country.
I don't know, if you're booking for the UFC and you want to try to break into Africa, pick 3 places.
I might try. I would probably just do Cape Town or Johannesburg, because again, it's relatively. I don't know what some of this is based on.
You're going with
information.
So we're going with South Africa, which is where
I'd
we
go with
started
South
this.
Africa. I might try again. There might be places in Egypt I would try, but I'm not sure what their political situation is right now.
Well, I was going to suggest Egypt, but you were insistent on West Africa, and that's not going to help you there. But because that would be my model. Would be the first place I'm going if I'm going to try to break into Africa. Like they've tried to break all over the world. They've done a pretty successful job of it. I think Africa's the last place to go outside of Antarctica.
Yeah, that's the last country. Well, some of that actually also will depend on where you draw the line for that, because now they've done stuff in the Middle East, but they've not really gone into proper continental Africa.
Right, they've done Saudi Arabia.
They've done no,
they haven't done Saudi Arabia. They're
going to do Saudi Arabia. They've done Abu Dhabi a few times.
Yes, that's what I meant. But again, yeah, if I'm going to start anywhere, I'm starting in South Africa.
Yeah, it's just the most stable, all things considered.
Mm-hmm.
And it has the infrastructure to deal with a major UFC event.
Why not Nigeria? In your opinion, does Nigeria have the structure to mount a UFC event?
I doubt it. And that's not to say there aren't big venues, because there are large venues. Soccer's a huge deal.
That's why I brought up the World Cup. I'm like, every place has soccer, including Africa. So I'm like, there's got to be something there.
Here's the giant but: the state of some of those stadiums is.
There is an article that was written about when the Olympics or the World Cup comes to some of these third world countries, and just they come, the money comes in, and then it all leaves, and there's just the stadium just becomes this giant eyesore. Just terrible thing. They don't know how else to fill it. In America, you build a basketball arena, but when there's not basketball, you've got the circus and the ice capades and pro wrestling, and there's all kinds of stuff you can put in there to keep things rolling. And a lot of these other countries just have difficulties filling these Olympic stadiums. They want the Olympics, they want the prestige of the Olympics, but then they have these facilities that go utterly unused. The same thing with soccer stadiums.
Yeah, to that point, the upcoming World Cup that's being held in Qatar, the only way they were able to really make stadiums to fit specifications of the World Cup was through slave labor.
All right, here we go. We are beginning round 1 here between Benitez and Yusef. We begin with a series of trading strikes right in the center of the ring. Benitez gets back to along the cage, so he's circling. Oh, he takes a hard right there from Yusef, which got his attention. He recovers pretty nicely, though. He's backed up against the cage again, but he's continuing to circle. At least he's not going straight back like Hynek was. Benitez throws a kick, and Yusef immediately counters with a right, and those rights are doing some damage.
Yeah, again, Yusef very good about closing distance, about exploding through, fast hands, good power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like what I see so far. He's definitely keeping Benitez on the defensive. Benitez keeps circling. He's already taken damage to the left eye, it looks like. All right, and we're circling still.
Yeah, Benitez is going to do a lot of that.
So Yusef choosing to stick his left hand right in Benitez's face and then maybe try to find a home for that right. All right, he starts distracting him with his hands, and Yusef does, and then lands a leg kick. Benitez returns a leg kick. Yusef's just stalking Benitez, looking for an opening.
If Yusef was a little bit more experienced about cage cutting, he'd have Benitez in all kinds of trouble right now. He's not strictly following, but he's not cutting off the way you see some of the really elite guys do it.
Yeah. Yeah, Benitez seems to be able to just continually circle to the left without much resistance from Yusef.
There's a cut on the left eyebrow of Benitez, I think.
Yeah, I said he's already taken damage over there. All right, Benitez throws a couple of high kicks, don't do a lot for him, follows with a hook that also just hits the wind. Oh, counter left from Yusef. Gave Benitez a bit of the wobbles there for a moment. Yeah, Benitez is not liking getting hit by this guy. Counter left now from Benitez.
This is some of the most kicks I've seen Yusef use as well. That's a really nice addition to his game.
Benitez finally scored on Yusef, and Yusef almost went to his knees. Now Benitez is going in, try to fire back. Yusef circles away. They square off again. That got Yusef's attention for sure. Nice overhand hook combination from Yusef. Yusef is definitely trying to put this away early.
He's that kind of fighter. It's actually one of the things Benitez is going to try to use to his credit, is to maybe tire him out a little bit, draw this thing out.
Mm-hmm. Exchange of leg kicks there. You said Benitez is not much of a kicker.
No, Yusef, much of a kicker.
Yusef's not much of a kicker. Any particular reason why? Just finds more success with his hands.
Just also a young fighter, you know. Just you feel things out.
Two square off again. Now Yusef doing some circling. Well, he looks to be looking for an opening on Benitez. Doing a little bit of a shoulder shimmy, not much of one, but a little bit of a shoulder shimmy. Ooh, takes a hard punch there and knocked his neck back. Neck and head.
Yeah, that left from Benitez really changed kind of the course of how this round's been going. Yusef not nearly as aggressive now, and part of that's just how he throws his punches. He is vulnerable to a faster counter.
And down goes Benitez. Yusef's on top of him, and we're done. Let's check the replay on that one, because I'm not quite sure. I mean, you were in the middle of something there, but Yusef sort of nailed Benitez. Benitez went down and went into a bit of a ball, and just Yusef stood over him. We did the one-handed ground and pound, and Benitez had to be saved. Let's go ahead. Hopefully they'll show the replay in just a second here, and we can see exactly what happened. But we've got a round one stoppage for Mr. Yusef. Good on him. All right, he had to put his headband back on.
That was just a beautiful pullback counter right.
Okay, so here it is again. Benitez throws the left. Yep. Counter looks like almost like a right hook. Yeah, right hook landed right at squaw on the chin. Down went Benitez on his back, and Yusef was all over him. Yeah, his legs went right out from under him. So
yeah. That's the punch that Conor McGregor kind of made his bones doing. Just get him to swing, pull back just a hair. When they miss, come back in, power hand right down the middle. It's I bring up Conor not because he is the best example of this, but one that I assume most of you will have seen. It's a classic boxing. That left even landed, but just, again, you get that counter, that pullback counter. It's a beautiful intercepting counter strike, and when it lands correctly, it even misses the parry, but Benitez brings his hand back low instead of into proper defensive position, right to the jaw, and we're done here.
Okay, with an official time of 4 minutes and 14 seconds of the first round, Sodic Yusef defeats Gabrielle Benitez with a TKO via punches. Outstanding work there from the featherweight. Where does that leave him in the rankings now? What's next for good old Yusef?
He is unranked, and they do seem to want to be bringing him along, again, a little bit slower. They want to groom him. So I don't think we're going to see him fighting anybody of significant name value in the immediate future, but he will be positioned better.
I'm guessing he gets maybe a co-feature on a fight night card somewhere internationally?
Possibly, depending on again, what they want to do next specifically, but he's... this was only his... Just for the record, this was his 11th professional fight. And he's very clearly, and I don't mean this as a negative, this is not, Cain Velasquez. I mean, even Cain, who debuted in the UFC at 2-0, had 5 or 6 fights before they put him into the title picture kind of thing. So I don't expect him to be fighting anyone in the top 15 in the near future, but he might fight someone... Again, they're going to match him up favorably, and I don't mean that negatively necessarily, but he's going to be fighting a lot of guys who are more on the fun side of things as opposed to guys who are really going to give him a stern test for at least the next 18 months or so.
Well, in terms of positioning, there's positioning as far as opponents, and then there's positioning in terms of profile. What kind of cards do you stick them on? Where I was going was they tend to not do 2 UFC pay-per-view main cards in a row. Usually they want to break things with the amount of cards they have to do, the amount of content they have to produce between ESPN and ESPN Plus, and then the the traditional pay-per-view. They tend to mix it up. So that's why I was saying, but the other side of that is, do you bounce him around different states in the U.S., try to get him a following here after he's had this high-profile match, or do you tour him out, trot him out internationally? Do you stick him on? Right now they've already got the card in Russia already booked. That's the next pay-per-view with Poirier and Nurmagomedov.
No. That is not accurate. Poirier and Nurmagomedov are fighting in Abu Dhabi.
Right. Russia's later in the year.
And it's not a terribly compelling card. They're going to China in 2 weeks. So I imagine they'll try to stick him. And again, a lot of this is just kind of who's available to go where, when. There's a lot of just the machine turning in the UFC at this point.
How much of that Russia card do they have booked? It's much later in the year, isn't it?
It's not that much later. Hang on. Pull up my list of UFC events. November 9th. Sorry. I'm thinking they had another one. What am I confusing that with? And they have... Oh, geez. Yeah, for some reason, I'm confusing it with a different card that had a lot of Russians on it.
Well, there's certainly a lot of those in the U.S., in the UFC.
So, my mistake, there's nothing booked for that one just yet, but we'll see coming up.
All right, we are moving on to our middleweight feature bout here. One of the co-features, Yol Soldier of God Romero versus Paulo Costa.
Formerly, his nickname used to be Bohachinia.
What does
he
that
changed,
mean?
Rubber something or other.
Terrific.
He changed it to the Eraser.
Great. Gotta love these nicknames. So
it's Brazilian nicknames, man. They're weird.
So I watched on my living room television today an entire boxing card, almost an entire boxing card. Part of it was, for some odd reason, was on UFC Fight Pass.
Because they're desperate for content.
An entire boxing card that was brought out by Facebook Live. That was fun. The main event was, I guess this whole thing was done for charity from the fighter Shelley Vincent, I believe her name was. she helped promote and set this thing up, and it was, I think, to raise money for the family of one of her trainers who has passed away.
Good for her doing that. Yoel Romero, one of the more underappreciated walkout songs.
Okay.
He comes out to Dominican merengue.
So, for the people who might be listening to this for the first time on Podcoin, well past the 10 minutes that they need you to get the credit for it,
God bless you.
What is a Yoel Romero, other than popping positive for steroids and the whatnot?
Oh, for God's... Again, one time that was provably a tainted supplement. My jokes about his physique aside, I don't want to open us up to litigation.
So, just give the brief history of Yoel Romero here so people know why I do love the Soldier of God.
Yoel Romero, apart from being just a genetic freak, and again, steroids, there's such a massive misconception about what various ones will do. They will not give you a body like his. There's a lot of genetics that go into that. He was an international wrestler representing Cuba for many years, competed in a few different Olympics, won a silver medal in 2000 or 2004. I need to look that up because I cannot remember off the top of my head. 2000, in the games in Sydney. He won the silver. One of the only guys who holds multiple wins over Cael Sanderson, and anyone in the wrestling community knows how rare that is. Transitioned to MMA, moved from Cuba to the United States, transitioned to mixed martial arts, fought under the Strikeforce banner for a while, moved down to middleweight, and has beaten every middleweight put in front of him except Robert Whittaker. And arguably he won their most recent fight. In fact, I believe I did score it for him when I was doing so live. A freak athlete, incredible explosive ability. He has great wrestling takedowns, a little bit lax on the control. Incredible power. That's really what I think startles a lot of people when they fight him.
Yeah, he hits like a truck.
They think they know. They think they have a feel for the distance. Then suddenly he's about 5 inches closer than you expect, and he punched you in the face, and you don't know what happened. He knocked out Chris Weidman with a flying knee. He knocked out Luke Rockhold with an overhand left. He beat Jacare via decision. He stopped Derek Brunson in the third round of their fight. We already saw Brunson fight. He knocked out Lyoto Machida with elbows from kind of like from top position half guard. He knocked out Tim Kennedy with punches. Again, he's mostly a finisher, and he's given the best middleweight in the world, that would be Sir Robert of Knuckles, the toughest fights of his career thus far.
By that, he means Robert Whittaker, folks.
Yeah, for those of you who did not, just for the record, for all the UFC fans out there who voted for Pettis versus Ferguson as fight of the year for 2018 over Whittaker Romero, you do not deserve so much. It was just such a better fight. It was just seen by fewer people because Ferguson and Pettis was on the undercard of Conor and Khabib, and it happened earlier in the year.
Right.
But if you have not seen, both of them are great. The second one is fantastic. If you have not seen the Whittaker and Romero fights, look up Bobby Knuckles and the Soldier of God, because those two are magic when they fight.
Robert Whittaker has a fight coming up in the not too distant future.
Him and Israel Adesanya. I am so hyped for that fight. Not a joke. I love that fight. Adesanya is right now one half of my fight of the year for 2019. His fight with Kelvin Gastelum from earlier this year was insane. Look it up if you haven't seen that one, because that was great. It is so Whittaker and Adesanya in one repping Australia, one repping New Zealand, taking place in, I believe, Adelaide. That's going to be nuts. That MMA doesn't get much better than that.
So, really quick, 50 words or less as we wait for the fighters to begin, as they both take to the cage. What does Paulo Costa have to do to nullify the wrestling and the striking power of the Soldier of God?
Costa has a lot of power as well. Let's not sell that short. The man thuds. He's also good about going to the head and body. Not as good as I would like, but it's MMA. If you don't headhunt exclusively, I consider you a godsend. He's good about that. There's a couple of things about Costa's game that are limiting. One, he's not as good in open space as he is when he has you against the fence. He really needs his opponent to have severely limited options. So if he can back Romero into the fence and tee off for an extended period of time, that's going to be his best option here. Also, if Romero does go for takedowns, while Romero has great takedowns, he does not have great top control. He tends to explode through things rather than really establish himself there. So if he does get taken down, just do not give up the position. Continue scrambling. Try to keep a decent pace because Yoel Romero will take time off. I've heard it best described this way. Yoel Romero only has two methodologies of fighting. He's unloading or he's reloading.
All right, here we go.
So again, try to time your offense to that.
All right, we start off with a kick from Costa. Two of them, as a matter of fact. Romero taking a more defensive approach in the beginning, sort of circling, bouncing. Now he's starting to engage through look like a hook kick there.
He does a lot of that. It's crazy for as much as wrestling and as heavy as his hands are. He does a lot of like Taekwondo training and has a lot of kicks like that.
So in the exchange there, it looks like he went for a takedown against Costa, and he just kind of awkwardly fell and rolled, and Costa got away. But he definitely looked like he lost his footing there. Was not a pretty looking takedown.
Now, again, what Romero does, his wrestling, is a lot of classical international wrestling designed to score rather than MMA-style wrestling, which is after control.
All right, so he just landed a big right. Costa went flat on his back, but it wasn't hard enough to keep him down. Roland Yolen went in for the kill, but Costa recovered, and they're both back on their feet again. Good. So right before that, Romero struck high and was shooting at the same time. It was really awkward looking.
He does that a lot too. He's good about mixing up kind of when he chooses to go. He's good about mixing that up.
Mm-hmm. Something about Yoel Romero's face in this, like I don't know how much Costa's landed on him, but he looks very anxious about being hit by this guy. But it's that kind of look like after you've been hit, like I don't want to be hit again. I have to change my plan here.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's taken a tremendous amount of damage from him.
Well, again, Costa hits hard. Now, I really don't think I emphasize that enough. This man can thud.
So it looks like he landed two lefts there as Costa tried to get in on him. Now Costa's being a bit defensive. Changed tactics, tried to move in, nearly got hit with a spinning back fist from Romero. Costa has kept Romero pretty much against the cage for the majority of this round.
Yeah, Romero is, again, not all that diligent about his footwork, and this is where Costa wants you so that he doesn't have to worry about his own ring positioning or whatnot. You can see him swinging heavy.
Yeah,
but Romero avoiding a lot of it so far, to his credit.
Yep, using a lot of boxing defense there, being able to push away punches, or he's just evading using a head movement. Went for the Muay Thai knee strike there. What the?
Yoel Romero, master of the 52. Obscure reference, no one will get. It's okay.
So he just flopped on his back. Did I'm sorry, he didn't flop. He got kicked in the balls.
That's never good.
I didn't see it at first, so it looked like he just dropped to his back and invited Costa into his guard, and I'm like, it's an odd move against the cage. Oh yeah, knee right in the nuts. So what happened there is Costa went for a knee in the clinch up against the fence, and he didn't get the height on it that he should have to be appropriate and legal in a fight like this, and he just fucking punted. Poor Yoel Romero and his soldiers of God.
I have on occasion wondered what MMA would look like if groin strikes were legal.
A lot of kicking in the balls.
Well, I wonder how much of it would get and I don't mean to accuse anyone of, malingering, but I wonder how much of it would get the same reaction from fighters that it does, knowing that they can get time to recover.
In the years we've been watching this, just as long as, I used to do your podcast, and we've both been writing for 401, we've seen guys flop.
Oh, yeah. We've seen guys exaggerate to get a break. We've seen, and a lot of guys get kicked there and then just like, nope, screw it, still going.
Right.
So, again, it's not a major thing. I'm not saying I want the rules amended to include it. I have wondered what the sport looks like from, like a meta standpoint, what techniques
How
are
many
different.
guys can walk through a kick in the balls as opposed to fanning themselves and clutching their pearls?
Well, yeah, but also, again, how do you adjust your stance to account for it? How do you, what techniques do you utilize? What ground positions change?
Well, we're back on our feet again, and the fight has resumed. Costa moved in on Yoel. Yoel backed up. Now Costa's backing up, and Yoel's pursuing with some overhand lefts. Yoel Romero with a few kicks to the leg. Costa goes for the head. Yoel shoots for the legs. They fought a bit on the ground there, just kind of punching each other. Yoel tried to go after Costa. Costa evaded, and now they are exchanging strikes against the fence. Gosh, this is a tough one to call. I mean, I'm leaning...
From a scoring? No,
Yeah.
Look, man, you get dropped as bad as Costa did. You got to give it to Romero.
Well, no, that's where I was going with this. I'm definitely leaning towards Romero, but it's not like he hasn't taken his, he's not like he hasn't taken his fair share of punishment in this round.
Well, again, this is why we have gradients of scoring and 10 nines instead of 10 eights.
After you said it, I was like, oh, that's true. We did drop Costa at least once. Just a lot of the work for Costa, the problem is that it was the one time and it didn't really result in a whole lot. Meanwhile, Costa has been working Romero against the fence a lot.
He's come close to taking it back, but I don't think he's done enough to counteract that. Again, that kind of a knockdown. Mm-hmm. I might be wrong though. Again, any others out there might be scoring this for Costa because he's just been more consistent.
Someone might make the argument that he's been quote unquote pushing the pace.
Oh, shut up!
I knew that was going to get your goat. All right, so round one is over. I'm going to go ahead and score that one for Romero, though Costa certainly made a good accounting of himself. Definitely put Romero on his heels a few times. Romero looks very anxious in there now, very, very cautious about wanting to go punch for punch with this guy. And you've said it now a few times, he also hits like a truck. So, oh, look at that. Yeah, Romero got dropped too.
They both took some pretty serious damage. Again, I'm not going to get upset about a scorecard for either guy there. I am going to lean towards Romero. I am not sold on that though, so I don't really care what way you score this one.
Romero almost seems to be throwing wild at times.
Yeah, that's fair. He does that. It is not an inaccurate assessment of some of his.
Granted, your feet are not always planted when you're striking in MMA, but there's been a couple of times where he was really off balance and he just winged a punch.
Yeah, that's not uncommon for him. He does throw himself out of position a lot.
He's slipping on the canvas too. I'm noticing. He just did it now. All right, Costa taking the center, backing Romero up against the fence again. Romero looking to always deflect that first hard punch that's coming from him and then look for a counter. See, here's what I like about what Romero's doing. Like I said, he's got his head and hips there on a swivel. He's able to evade and deflect a lot of the punches. So there's some really good boxing.
He rolls with
Romero.
these very well. Yeah, he does not. Costa didn't land as much flush looking at the replay as you thought he did live in that first round.
Sure. So Romero's able to stay in the pocket with him longer than maybe another person because he's using some great boxing defense here.
Yeah.
Of course, he just took a hard left to the side of the head, 2 of them now. Man's got a chin. You give him all the credit in the world.
Robert Whittaker couldn't finish him, and Robert Whittaker's no one to trifle with. But Costa is really coming on strong.
Yeah, he is. He went to the body head there a few times, and I actually thought Romero was going to go down. Romero's mouth is open.
Yeah, this is the first time Romero's kind of looked his age, and in fairness, he's still in better shape than I am, and I'm like 10 years younger than he is.
He looks kind of exhausted. He's winging a lot of punches.
He's not doing some of the things that you really do want to do to get Costa to back off of you.
No.
I'm surprised he hasn't tried to tie up more and work a takedown from the clinch instead of a double leg in space.
Right. Maybe move in with your face guarded. Let the guy throw and then tie him up and work your pommels, try to get underhooks and take the guy down. I do that with my son all the time and my nephew. Pommels, trying to get underhooks.
Good. It's a really important fundamental principle.
I was doing that before we moved back. I was doing that with my nephew. I sat him on the kitchen table, and I was just like, "Come on, try to get underhooks." He was actually came to it pretty naturally, more naturally than my son does.
Well, your son is your son.
My son is more of the bodybuilder type than he is the wrestler type. Anyway,
you really should just show him like strongman competitions.
So we're back to the fight here. We've got about 1 minute and 48 left in the second round. I don't know what happened there, but the ref was like, "Hey, keep fighting." A lot of arm punches from Romero. I like his boxing defense. His boxing offense, I'm not liking. I know he can do better.
Yeah, he really does seem out of sorts in this fight. And much credit to Costa for that, because he's taken maybe the third best middleweight in the world and has got him very off of his game.
Well, I'm wondering if part of this was they knew this guy was going to come out hard and fast in the first round or two, and they figure if they took him into as deep a water as they can in a 3-round fight, that there'd be more openings because he's going to have a lot more gas. I mean, when you look at the definition on this guy, he's broader in the shoulders. He looks like he's carrying more muscle mass. I'm wondering if they think just by the third round he'll be out of oxygen.
I mean, neither of these guys are really wonders in the third round, although Romero has a fair number of finishes in the third round.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Look, Romero obviously looks like he's built out of marble, but he seems to have fought a little conservatively from the Yoel Romero fights that I've seen. So that's what I'm saying. I think maybe the strategy was take this into the third round and watch this guy start dropping his hands.
Wouldn't surprise me too much if he comes out for the third round like a house on fire.
Mm-hmm. I don't like the tongue thing that he's doing. What are you, Michael Jordan? Knock it off. Yoel Romero keeps sticking his tongue out.
He's just trying to mock him. He's trying to get him to do something stupid so he can counter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll tell you what, Costa's starting to look really gassed. He's starting to look very tired. Yoel Romero just scored a takedown, and Costa couldn't defend. Had he had a little bit more time to work there at the end of that round, this might have gone someplace, because he was flat on his back and Yoel Romero was in his guard. So, round 2, what do you think?
Oh, Costa's round, clearly. I mean, absent a few moments and then that takedown late would kind of secure that. There might be a 10-8 argument in there under the new rules, barring a couple of things that Romero does.
What new rule would you say specifically lends itself to a 10-8 round in there? Because I'm asking you what you scored it, because I'm honestly clueless. That was too close for me. So where are you getting 10-8 from? And I'm not like saying you're wrong. I just don't know what you're talking about.
The new scoring criteria specifies that a 10-8 is appropriate if a fighter wins a round by a wide enough margin. So
Boy,
you don't need it.
That's subjective.
A little bit, but you don't. So I mean, it used to be, the fight could have been reasonably stopped, but wasn't. Was kind of the criteria,
which made more sense to me.
Yeah, but also led to a lot more of them not happening, kind of thing.
All right, round 3 picks up here. Yoel Romero doesn't seem to be nearly as tired as Paulo Costa. We'll see how that plays out in this round. Yoel Romero was sticking his left out there. We're seeing some faster lefts being thrown, a few lefts in succession. Though Paulo Costa hit him once with his left. Got him again on the chin. Yoel Romero's kind of walked right through it and then threw a shitty front kick. Oh, nice uppercut there from Yoel Romero. That rang Costa's bell a bit.
Costa's face is a little busted up at this point too.
Yeah, he is. So he's taking some punches from Yoel Romero. Costa doing kind of a shitty version of Max Holloway. He's just kind of sticking that fist right in there.
Yeah, you ain't Max, buddy.
Max actually finds the target. Keep your damn tongue in your mouth. Once again, just kind of arm punching, sticking his fists in Costa's face.
Yeah, it seems like Romero's going to come out and take like the first minute or 2 minutes of the fight, and then Costa's going to take that extra time to kind of recharge, and then we'll try really hard for the finish as the fight goes on.
Okay, I think we have an eye poke here. Once again, the victim being Yoel Romero. The fight's been paused, and okay, here it is. Nope. The other way around. Yoel Romero poked Paulo Costa in the eye. He's being checked by the doctor now. We'll see where this goes. I've seen worse. I don't think there's going to be a problem here. The old, what's his name? Mr. Wonderful? Somebody Davis?
Phil Davis?
Phil Davis, whose main weapon in the fight was to poke you in the eye like the Three Stooges.
I mean, to the extent that Phil Davis has weapons at his disposal, sure. I've seen entirely too many Phil Davis fights to believe that's a thing.
And he definitely did some damage when he was poking people in the eye constantly in every fight.
I mean, again, that wasn't the worst one, but it's not pleasant. I mean, yeah, Phil Davis did it a fair bit. John Jones can't seem to go a fight without doing it. There's a lot of guys who do it, and sadly, the rules are not. I hate to say they're not enforced because they are, but there's implementations changes that I wouldn't mind seeing.
I tell you, Paulo Costa doing a pretty good job of attacking the body on Yoel Romero.
Yeah, again, he does go to the body well. It's one of his strong suits. He's not just a straight headhunter.
There's been a lot of head-body combinations, right-left, head-body. Good stuff there. He's not quite backing Yoel Romero into the fence like he was. Yoel Romero's starting to pick at him and right there in the center of the cage. Yeah, Costa's getting tired. He's starting to eat punches now from Romero. And he's doing the if you're happy and you know it, shake it off.
Yeah. Yeah, credit to Romero, man. Dude's got a hell of a chin. Because, again, Costa can crack. He has badly hurt plenty of guys with strikes. And Romero just rolls with them, deflects a lot of the force, and is still in his face.
Okay, sort of a Muay Thai, half a clinch there. Grabbed the back of his head and started uppercutting. Yeah, Costa's battered about the face. Starting to see blood coming out of the nose and the cheeks and around the mouth. Another good combination from Romero. Oh God! Stop taunting each other. Knock it off.
just fight.
the hand behind the. You're not winning this round, Costa. So don't put your hands behind your back. Cut it out. Two good straight lefts there from Yoel Romero find their home. Some clinched up uppercuts there from Romero. Yeah, Costa's just trying to survive here. Looks like, he got backhanded just now. He's covering up. Romero's starting to move in for the kill, but Romero's not pressing. That's weird. Why did he back off like that?
He doesn't want to get caught up in a brawl with this guy.
But that's the thing. Costa wasn't really defending. He was just sort of taking him.
Yeah, but again, the longer you stand there swinging, the easier it is for him to land some kind of counterpunch that you didn't see coming. He might also think he's up on the scorecards.
Well, 1-1, and he's winning this round.
Well, that first one could really go either way. Like I would not hang my hat on that if I'm Romero.
Mm-hmm. And you say Costa definitely won the second round.
That seems to be the consensus. I kind of looked up through Twitter as well.
Well, fuck it if Twitter said it.
I'm just saying I'm not alone in this. I have been alone on several of them. Some of them I stand behind, some of them I don't.
And a takedown by Romero. And reverse, Costa takes his back. Yoel Romero escapes. Not a tremendous amount of damage there by either guy. Ooh, spinning back fist from Costa. Oh, nice uppercut to end the round from Romero. I'm going to give it to him. I'm going to say Romero 2-1.
Good fight. Really engaging brawl those two had. I am perfectly happy with that fight.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. That was a good back and forth. I think both guys could refine their technique a bit, but as far as entertainment, action fight, as they say, I rather enjoyed that bout. All right, we have our decision. Paulo Costa defeated Yoel Romero by unanimous decision, 29-28 times 3. As we said, overall, really good fight. Both of us, I think, thought that Romero edged it out, but obviously the judges saw it differently, though you seem to think that the fight really could have gone either way, and you're perfectly fine with that score, yeah?
Yeah, my thing about I've had to adopt this position or lose my mind when it comes to my relationship with this sport. A close fight that could reasonably go to either man is not a robbery. Yeah, I scored the fight for Romero, but round 2, clearly Costa. Round 3, clearly Romero. No controversy. So it comes down to round 1. And guess what? There's a cogent argument for either man winning that round. Consequently, 29-28 for either man is a perfectly reasonable score to arrive at. I'm not going to get up in arms over... Again, if we'd had a 30-27, like, okay, fine, I might lose a bit of my mind over that. But I can't get too freaked out over every close fight that necessarily goes a slightly different direction when that's a reasonable direction to go.
All right, speaking of reasonable and unreasonable, Anthony Pettis versus Nate Diaz is up next in the what-the-hell welterweight division. So Nate Diaz, my impressions of him as a fighter, as long as I've been watching the guy fight, is he expects the other guy to just stand still and trade punches with him. He's a little less angry about it than his brother Nick is, who actively complains about that sort of thing. But Nate does want you to stand there and trade punches with him. Anthony Pettis, very dynamic fighter, though, as you expressed earlier, has had some troubles as of late, back and forth through this fight and that. Let's start with Nate Diaz. What does he have to do to nullify the dynamic striking and movement of Anthony Pettis?
For the record about the Diaz brothers, they both have a very specific idea about what wins a fight. And on occasion, that runs contrary to the actual scoring criteria that they're being judged by.
Yes, they like the "I walked him down, I pushed the pace" argument. They are
among others.
They are every terrible MMA fan.
The main thing Diaz has to do is some of the stuff he always does very well: pressure. Anthony Pettis really is not good at responding to pressure fighters. He tends to do okay for a bit, but his counters are one and done. Again, watch the Tony Ferguson fight's a really good example of this. Rafael dos Anjos fight, Poirier fight, Eddie Alvarez fight. I could go on. It's just not something he deals with all that well. So you keep a constant pace, you keep constant pressure, keep him backing up. Pettis is, again, he's primarily a kicker. That is the bulk of his offense. And if you do not let him settle himself, he can't ever really get it going. So constant pressure, cover up, fire back 1-2s with good volume. Again, Nate Diaz has a slightly more sophisticated and practiced jab than Stephen Thompson does, and Thompson jabbed up Pettis. So, again, keep a good pace, keep forward pressure, keep a high volume going at your opponent, and cut off the cage rather than just get annoyed and walk around when he tries to circle. I said this when they made the fight. If this were a 5-round fight, I would pick Nate Diaz without much hesitation. I think he's better over that distance, whereas Pettis is not. Over 3 rounds, I can see Pettis having a good first round, chopping up the legs, which is something that Nate does not. Neither of the Diaz brothers actually deal with leg kicks. They just eat them and go, is that all you got? What are you doing?
Right.
So if he stays smart, he stays mobile, does not freak out when pressured, keeps kicking the legs, hobbling up Diaz, doesn't get sucked into a Nate Diaz kind of fight, he can win 2 rounds and then just not get finished in the third kind of thing. But Nate Diaz takes a lot of abuse. I mean, he's only been finished, I think, once via strikes in his entire career. And that was a flush head kick from Josh Thompson. I believe it was like the 3rd one he landed. So I expect Nate to try to back Pettis into the fence, look to tee off on him, look to just keep him engaged and busy at distance, keep him unhappy, keep him flustered, and keep him working and moving. And that's kind of what each man has to do if they really want to be successful.
Now, Nate Diaz, very strong with his jiu-jitsu game, as well as his walking around and sulking and throwing arm punches and being generally disagreeable. What are the chances that Diaz tries to get in close, take Pettis down, and try to finish him on the mat? And if so, where does that leave Pettis?
Pettis off of his back has a good guard against a certain kind of top game. That certain kind of top game tends to be a wrestling heavy forward that learned jiu-jitsu second. If he tries to play guard with Diaz, I don't think that goes well for him.
Yeah, I would say...
I don't expect Nate Diaz to shoot a double. I don't think he ever has. If they really tie up consistently, he might look for a couple of throws. That's more kind of his game is if you tie up consistently and I can find a point to trip you up, get you down, I will grab something opportunistically. Honestly, the two, the more likely party I think to shoot a desperation double is more likely Pettis if he gets really fed up striking. If it's just not working for him, just to try and give Diaz something else to think about, is, hey, guess what? I might take you down. I then expect Diaz to flip him off and hurl insults, which is Nate Diaz's response to most external stimuli.
Okay. Who do you see winning this one?
I did lean towards Diaz officially. Again, Pettis' inability to deal with a consistent pressure fighter has dogged him his entire career. Like, he just doesn't do well when pressured, and Nate Diaz pressures you constantly. Pettis also, again, while he has a very good kicking game, is not much of a combination striker. So he's going to land, but Nate Diaz tends to throw back a higher volume, so I expect Pettis to land and then get hit with 2 or 3 clean counters, if not more.
So while we've been doing coverage of this as a watch-along, you've been doing written coverage for 411 Mania, which has a comment section for all of their posts. What's been the consensus tonight? Tell me about fan reaction on 411.
Well, let me have a look. I mean, I tend to not get a terribly contentious or vocal lot. I love my readers, and I thank them for not being, jackwagons. Because I've seen comment sections on the internet.
Well, look, Larry Zonka, who has been working at 411 for many, many years now, does most of the wrestling live coverage, and gets lauded and abused in almost equal fashion.
Yeah, I think I have driven out all the extremes, and no one wants to. So anyone who's like effusively praiseworthy just looks like they're sucking up because I don't think I deserve it. And anyone being horribly abusive is seen as just a flaming jackass not worth engaging with. So I get a very reasonable group of people that hang out and talk. So I thank you guys for that. The co-main, a lot of people excited for the main and co-main. Diaz and DC are relatively big names. Someone disagrees with one of the stoppages. Fair enough. So it's, again, just kind of my live coverage tends to just be a nice kind of happy little go-lucky place where we good-naturedly rib each other on a little bit. We are actually getting there's a bit of a discussion about the nature of bodywork in MMA going on and how little it's done. I thank you all very much for that. I love you guys.
Outstanding. What's going on in the Twitterverse?
Terrible things, because it's Twitter.
What's going on in the Twitterverse relative to this particular MMA card?
Terrible things, because it's Twitter. Hang on, let me have a look then. Okay, what are people using for the hashtag? There's just a lot of kind of generalized hype a lot of praise for Costa and Romero. As you expect, a little bit of whining about the scores because Twitter. And a lot of just kind of, a lot of excitement for Diaz, who is now in the cage.
I'm guessing there was a lot of people like me who saw it for Romero and are displeased at the...
Yeah, just kind of generally.
Anyone saying, why was it scored 200-0 for Canelo?
I could make the joke. In fact, I think I will.
Well, what I mean by that, for those listening maybe for the first time on Podcoin to one of these...
Oh, who was that? Who was that idiot who scored... I need a name. I need a name of one of the judges.
Oh, you're talking about...
Was it Tony Weeks? Okay, we'll go with Tony Weeks.
Okay.
Tony Weeks saw it 120-36 for Canelo.
Great. I'm glad I can help you with your Twitter comedy.
Not UFC Uruguay. God, that was last week. It wasn't very good.
Anywho. We were talking about that just as an aside, and it was whatever the card that Durand May headlined.
UFC Sacramento a few weeks ago.
Okay, but I thought that was the one that wasn't very well attended, and you told me it was.
I think they taped off the top section, but they had Uriah Faber on the card, so it's going to draw well at the box office.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. What's been in the more recent years since the UFC was bought, and they've had to pump out as much content as they have? Has there been one? Because I know they did one in Florida where they were like, "We're never coming back to South Florida again."
Okay, well, that was several years ago.
No, I know that was when they did the miniature flyweight tournament.
That kind of, it was something. I can't remember if it was that or if it was something else. And they put it on Miami proper on a dance night, and people were just like, yeah, you know what? They brought a weak card.
Yeah,
like that. Even us hardcores were kind of like, yeah, you want to try and tap a new market with that?
So my question remains, outside of these some of these Florida cards that I know were notoriously not well attended, has there been anything in recent years where they're like, well, we'll never do this again?
No, nothing expressly stated as far as no, just heavens no. I mean, the ESPN card headlined by Lawler and Covington did okay at the gate, but again, they had the entire top section tarped off, which sometimes is just their policy. We're just not going to sell some of these seats because we're worried about the way the venue's set up, and we don't want to. But I mean, even that one did. That one was not very good. That only had a 10,000 attendance and a gate of 687,000. So for some reason, nobody was really interested in Miller and Guida and Covington and Lawler. I mean, in fairness, it was in New Jersey though.
Now, the Ultimate Fighter is gone, right? Has been for quite some time.
Oh, God, I wish.
That's still a thing? Even with Dana's looking for a fight series?
Allow me to explain Dana's mental hard-on for the Ultimate Fighter.
Okay.
In all seriousness, it's not been produced for a while because they don't have when they moved to ESPN, ESPN didn't want it. Dana said, okay, we won't bring it, but he's trying to shop it around to other outlets. He still wants to do the stupid show.
Okay.
Even though there's better options out there doing functionally the same thing. We must have the Ultimate Fighter, even though ESPN doesn't even want it for ESPN Plus. If you're not going to put it on Fight Pass, shut up, because you own all that.
I was going to say, if you insist on producing this thing, then might as well put it on Fight Pass and give people actually a reason to buy the stupid thing. But beyond that, why do they even need it? They don't.
They haven't needed it for 5.5 or 10 years. It has been an obsolete property for a really long period of time.
So how long is Dana White's is Dana White's Contender Series and Looking for a Fight the same thing? Because I know one of them was on YouTube.
No. Looking for a Fight is kind of like a bad travel show. Dana White's Contender Series runs for about a month and a half every summer, and is on ESPN Plus and is much, much better.
Okay, like I said,
it runs every week for. Again, like a month or so. More than a month, like 2 months, I think, in the summer, and it's just a much better option.
As I'm saying, if you've got the Contender Series and that's what ESPN wants, why even bother with the Ultimate Fighter? Or is that asking an obvious question?
You're asking a very obvious question, and the only answer is Dana White.
Dana White refuses to evolve.
He likes that property. God alone knows why.
Yeah.
He has a deep emotional attachment to it that I will never understand.
Well, the show itself, if you enjoy reality TV...
It stopped being useful after season 8.
Well, that's what I was getting to. The show itself, as they're running through, the episodes, if you like the stuff in the house, is, fair entertainment. But I remember covering those finales. They were the worst paced shows ever, and they were never any good.
Oh, dear God, thank you so much.
Ugh.
I cannot tell you. Look, I don't get a tremendous amount of crap all that often for what I do for 411. I really don't. I get good-natured stuff. I get guys with genuine critiques. I get reasoned disagreements.
Right.
Fine with all of it.
I'm going to stop you there because we actually have a fight we have to look at. And for a while, we can come back to you ranting about the horribleness of the Ultimate Fighter. But we should tell the people that Diaz and Pettis are now engaging. There was a wide hook there. It was ducked underneath. Diaz is now coming after Pettis. He landed a few strikes there to the body, then backed off of him. Pettis is now throwing leg kicks. So far...
to the shock of everyone.
Diaz is actually showing some degree of striking defense and not just dropping his hands and looking annoyed.
He's got good defense when he chooses to use it.
When he chooses to use it. Oh, good
look,
right there.
I mean, again, watch the McGregor fights. When he covers up and moves forward, he has a lot of success.
Right. It's just most of the time he just walks around sulky and surly. All right, right now they're tied up against the cage, and Diaz laid in some for visual effect, some punches to the side of Pettis' body. See, this is what I thought might happen, is that Diaz would not want to get into a big brawl with Pettis, tie him up, and try to go for a submission, though Pettis got out of the
Well, Nate's got a good
there.
clinch game.
Yeah. I'd like to see him clinch with Pettis and actually work for a takedown.
Well, again, if the Diaz brothers could actually evolve with the sport.
So Diaz leaned into a kick there from Pettis and shook it off.
Yeah, that's going to happen more than once. Again, the first round is when Diaz is the most vulnerable here, just because of how Pettis fights.
Oh my gosh, they look like they're dancing. So I was going to compliment Diaz because he's cutting off the cage nice from Pettis. Pettis is trying to circle. Diaz is not just following him; he's cutting him off. And then they did this weird two-step, and we're in the clinch again with Pettis against the cage. Diaz is landing with his left hand, not doing a tremendous amount of damage, but they are there for effect. There's a knee to the belly. Pettis breaks free. Diaz goes after him. Pettis is circling around looking for an opening.
And we can see again already, Anthony Pettis does not like pressure.
Circling to his right here.
I'm surprised at the stance switching Nate's been throwing out. He's normally just a straight-up southpaw.
What do you make of him circling to his right? Because normally aren't you supposed to be circling to your left?
Some of it's relative to what your opponent's doing. A lot of the circling philosophy comes from being in an established stance relative to your opponent. With the amount of switching that both guys have been doing, it's less of an issue.
All right. And they go down, and Pettis attempts to lock in a guillotine. Diaz looks like he's remaining pretty calm. I don't think Pettis has this finished yet. Diaz got his head out and is working.
Tapping out Nate Diaz would be a superhuman feat.
Yeah, I was not. I mean, for scoring purposes, you got to give that to Pettis there. I mean, it's an offensive move, but I didn't think it was going to end the fight. I wasn't particularly worried about Diaz. Diaz is now working from the guard, and here's where Pettis really has to be mindful. You don't want to tangle with the Diaz brothers on the ground. These both are Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, if I recall correct.
Yeah.
All right. Diaz takes Pettis' back. Yeah, this is not going well for Pettis.
You know what? Good on Nate adapting to actually force the grappling here when the striking was going not quite his way.
Yeah, he might have actually fed Pettis his head so that Pettis would feel comfortable trying to go for a guillotine and do exactly what he's doing now. Get out of it and work the submissions. So,
wouldn't shock me.
A lot of that in jiu-jitsu where you kind of give something up to get better positioning. So we've got a body lock, not a great one, kind of a loose body lock around the waist and crotch of Pettis. Diaz is working from the back. Did they just get stood up? Oh, no, the round's over. I was about ready to throw something at my television.
Hey, we had some guys get stood up from side control earlier in this event, so who knows? In fairness, they had stalled out pretty badly at that point, so.
I'm not going to knock it then. If you're not working, you're not working. If you're just holding a position, whether it's side control or guard or whatever, the object here is you have to work towards something. If you're not working, stand them up. Stand them up! So, obviously, that round goes to Diaz, 10-9.
Yeah, it was going okay for Pettis until they started grappling.
I would say, even while they were on their feet, I mean, I don't think Pettis was being beaten pillar to post, but I think Diaz was doing more work and was landing more strikes.
Sure, but there's also quality of strike. Again, if they just do the whole thing on the feet, then okay, yeah, it might go Pettis' way. Once they started grappling, that everything was coming up Diaz.
Yeah, it all went south in a hurry.
Oh boy, there's Pettis in the corner.
So Pettis throws a kick and then falls on his ass.
Also, standard Anthony Pettis fare.
I think Diaz has decided that he's not standing with this guy anymore because he took the opportunity to rush Diaz against the fence and looked for a grappling opportunity. Pettis escaped, and they're taking the center of the cage again. Weird overhand from Diaz. Counter strike from Pettis.
I'm curious how what Pettis might do to adjust so he doesn't even remotely entertain the grappling in the future.
Oh, okay. Diaz is starting to employ the drunken boxing technique for for technique and stature.
Yeah, it's pretty standard fare.
Drunken boxing was one of the attributes my monk had when I played D&D.
I think it's a thing again in 5th edition.
Sweet.
You're not going to resurrect it for our game, are you?
Drunken boxing?
The way of the drunken fist, I think, is what it is.
We'll see. I won't be too silly. I'll probably get myself tossed out of the game if I go down that route.
I think we're only set up for like a one-shot, right?
I don't know. I'm not in charge of this. All right.
If Ronnie only wants to do a one-shot and we all have a good time, I wouldn't hate DMing more of a running thing if that's something we're interested in doing on Patreon or some such.
All right, I guess Diaz got poked in the eye. Yep,
a few times, actually, throughout this round.
He's walking it off. He's fine. He's fine. He's fine.
Look, the day a Diaz brother voluntarily bows out due to injury is the day hell freezes over.
And Yosemite Sam says, let's fight. For those of you who are listening
He's got
to
his braids tucked into his shirt. I'm so sad we don't get the Beltron stash.
Oh, good. Right there from Diaz. From Pettis, rather. Shakes up Diaz. Diaz kind of walks through it, tries to tie him up. Pettis escapes. I like the footwork from Pettis tonight.
Yeah, he's doing a lot better than he normally does. But again, Nate Diaz also is not a monster cage cutter.
Good straight right there from Diaz. Diaz trying to hold him against the cage now. Pettis keeps escaping.
But I just say this as a frame of reference. Now imagine that instead of Nate Diaz, this is, Kamaru Usman or Colby Covington or any of the big wrestlers.
Mm-hmm.
He's not escaping the same way he is because Nate's not very fleet of foot.
Right. All right. He's got his back against the cage. Diaz does. Tries to throw a knee to the face. Pettis, for some odd, I can't tell if Diaz drove him down or if Pettis willingly went to his back.
Bit of both. I think part of Pettis' philosophy is he's going down, he wants guard rather than you just dictating how it goes.
Right. All right. Pettis trying to defend off his back. Diaz backed off of him, tried to look for another road inside to get mount, and Pettis took the opportunity to escape and is now clinched up against the cage.
Pettis already breathing heavy, though. You can see every time he's backing up, he's starting to suck a little bit of wind.
I like what I'm seeing from Nate Diaz in terms of wrist control, something I'm trying to teach my nephew and my son, and my daughter for that matter. For God's sakes, grab a wrist.
Wrist control, bicep control. Be mindful of your opponent at all times.
Good elbows from Nate Diaz. He's landed a few of those in that clinch. They back off. Pettis not trying to escape the infighting here, and Diaz is just kind of teeing off on him. Not doing a tremendous amount of damage, but instead of circling and trying to get better position, he's just kind of standing there and seeing what Diaz throws at him.
Yeah, again, look at his posture, look at his mouth when he's breathing. He doesn't like pressure, and this is why. His gas tank is not built around constant motion, constant countering. It's not something his game is designed
for. It's weird because
for.
he's not carrying a tremendous amount of muscle mass, at least not visible muscle mass. I mean, he's certainly an in-shape guy in terms of his physique, but he's not like the last two we saw. He's not visibly, overtly muscular.
Well, Pettis, again, he's taken some body shots. He's not the best at a high-paced fight, and his legs are kind of gone. He's not moving well. His legs won't go with him when he wants to move.
How old is Pettis now?
30-something? 32.
They're just trading in the pocket.
This is what Diaz wants. He wins these kinds of fights.
Yeah, Diaz, again, not Max Holloway, but he's good at picking guys apart.
Well, again, Holloway has a much more varied offense, is much better at forcing a pace, much better at cage cutting and mobility, but Diaz is taking a page out of what Max Holloway did to Pettis and just adapting it for his style.
This is a game of accumulation of strikes for Diaz. Figuring, well, I'll win these rounds if I can land more strikes. Even if they're not heavy hands, they're not doing a tremendous amount of damage. This is about accumulation and a numbers game versus trying to finish this guy. Good knee as we see the replay from Diaz. And he
landed a bunch of good. This is the best his clinch fighting has looked in a while in terms of variation of offense.
Yeah, I've definitely liked his clinch game tonight. He's not just clinching and leaning on the guy, making him carrying him. He's actually striking in the clinch, and he's being very effective. So I've got it 2-0 for Nate Diaz.
For a guy with a 3-year layoff, he looks great.
This is the first fight in 3 years?
His last fight was the second McGregor fight.
Wow. What's he been doing all this time? Just smoking pot?
Been doing Diaz things, I guess. So little weed, little training, little marathons. Started up he had a great line talking to media this last week. I got thrown out of school for fighting and selling weed. Now I have a CBD oil company, and I fight in the UFC. So suck it, teachers.
Perfect. All right, as we begin round 3 here, Diaz.
Pettis, you got a minute of Pettis, and then he's just going to lay against the cage and wilt. He is so done.
Yeah, Pettis. Diaz just kind of walked across the cage and pushed Diaz right into the fence. Yeah, Pettis looks pretty exhausted. Pettis is hoping that if he can deflect and defend enough of Diaz's punches, something will open itself up and he can maybe get a lucky punch in there or a lucky knee.
Again, Pettis is a one-and-done striker. He doesn't do a lot of volume stuff.
Now Pettis has Diaz up against the cage. I don't know how smart a move that is for Pettis.
If you're gonna be stuck in the clinch, get your back off the fence. It gives you more options to try and separate.
Weirdly enough, though, Diaz easily turned him around, but then instead of pressuring him or working the clinch game, he just backed off of him. I'm curious. Oh, good left there from Diaz. Missed with a spinning back up, and Pettis has eaten a bunch of knees. We might start to see him go down here. And he just willingly gave up his back. Oh, I think we're going to stop. We're going to end up stopping this.
Yeah, this, again.
Diaz is going for the ground and pound against the fence. Yosemite Sam is right there to try to stop it at this. Diaz gave up on the ground and pound, though, and is now grappling with him.
Odd choice, but he might want to make a point.
He's got his back. Pettis' head is up against the fence. Diaz, like I said, he had his back. Now he's taking him back for a rear naked choke attempt. He's got plenty of time to work. He's got a little less than 3 minutes. He's got the body lock around Pettis. Pettis turns it around and is now in Nate Diaz's guard. Still not a great place for you to be, as Nate's very good from the guard. And I don't see Pettis getting full mount from here. Do refs still think you're winning if you're in someone's guard? Not refs, judges.
Depends. They're a lot better now about actually being able to determine who's doing the best work from that position. But top is generally the better position in MMA. Like, that's just the way it is. There's some really great guard players in jiu-jitsu, but...
See, because I'm watching this, and Diaz is doing a lot of the work, but he's just doing it off of his back. This isn't wrestling. That's fine. That's jiu-jitsu.
Well, Nate's also going to be very good about making Pettis continue to work. And Pettis not wanting to work, he kind of wants to, like, okay, I can lean on you a little bit and get my wind back from here.
Pettis decided he no longer wanted to be there and just stood up.
He got his legs back under him long enough to, okay, I can be in a better position, and Nate's going to walk him down and immediately resume doing what he's been doing the whole fight.
Well, Pettis grabbed for the legs and tried to work his way on the inside there, and Diaz was having none of it. Pettis momentarily had Diaz's back there, but Diaz slipped right out of it then. Now Diaz is working his top game. Pettis rolls, Diaz takes his back, and he is just, again, not tremendously hard punches, but there's been a volume of punches. Diaz has not stopped working since these two have been on the ground. This has been all Diaz, pretty much, for these last 3 minutes here. Diaz once again trying to work that rear naked. And Pettis is just trying to hang on. We've got 30 seconds to go here. Diaz is working the back. I don't think he's going to finish the rear naked choke here at this point. Pettis has been pretty good about defending it. But as he's defending it, he's taking a lot of volume. Pettis spins. Now he's in Diaz's guard again.
Yeah, again, Pettis is going to see the final bell, but I don't think there's a reasonable way to score that fight for him at all.
And they're rolling to the very end.
I mean, credit to both guys. I love watching Nate Diaz roll. He's a talented jiu-jitsu practitioner.
Yes, he is. But I can't see this going any other way but unanimous decision, 30 across the board.
For Canelo.
For Canelo.
Max Holloway.
All right, your winner by unanimous decision with 2 scorecards reading 30-27 and 1 29-28, mysteriously. The man.
I imagine there's
Mumbles McMushmouth.
I'm just saying, Nate Diaz and Stipe Miocic both doing media for this event was
hilarious.
It was a thing. I imagine you could maybe make an argument for Pettis in the first, but I don't know, man. Even that's rough because he got taken down. I really don't know, but right guy won. Nate Diaz proceeds to call out Jorge Masvidal.
What other pearls of wisdom dribbled from the mouth of Mumbles McMushmouth?
Apparently, everyone knows what's up about Stockton, California.
Good.
And his boxing coach, who does not actually work with any professional boxers of note, is the best in the world.
Freddie Roach briefly looked up from his paper and went, "What?" And then went back to reading his paper.
We got, again, Nate called out Jorge Masvidal. I am completely okay with that fight if they make it. I was hoping Masvidal might get into the title picture, but Colby Covington and Kamaru Usman both seem to want that fight. They can push a lot of very obvious, very potentially ill-conceived buttons, but it's the UFC, so they're going to. In the build-up to that fight. I mean, you have Kamaru Usman, the Nigerian-born, I believe he's a Muslim, immigrant to the United States, has become champion, against Colby Covington, who is currently amping up on, how great Donald Trump is and the MAGA talk. I'm sure that won't go badly or anything in poor taste will be said.
They need to. Dana White just needs to follow Colby Covington around with like a swear jar. Every time he says something irrational or insulting, he has to put like $1 in there. So,
look, hang on. Dana White introduced Donald Trump at the Republican National Convention in 2015. Okay, he has nothing to talk about there.
Well, true. So, real quick, give me the short history of where we are with the welterweight division, because at this point, I've utterly lost track of who the welterweight champion is.
The welterweight champion is Kamaru Usman, who got the title by defeating Tyron Woodley via fairly dominant decision. Kamaru Usman is a grinder of the highest order, does a lot of ground and pound, especially it's high volume. He has smothering control, great wrestling, power when he chooses to use it. He is a really tough problem for – no one in the UFC has beaten him. He's a real problem for people to try and figure out.
Now, Tyron Woodley had hung on to that welterweight title for quite some time, didn't he?
Yeah, he held on to it for a while. There were some inactivity issues. I mean, he did have fights. He fought Stephen Thompson twice and Damian Maia in a string of some of the most uninspiring title fights. And I go out of my way to find stuff in those kind of fights that I can talk about because you have two of the best in the world fighting. Mm-hmm. There's stuff happening. I try to find it. That doesn't mean the fights are engaging. But that was Usman's last fight, actually, which was March of this year.
Okay.
Your former interim champion and current, I believe, number one contender is Colby Covington, who just beat Robbie Lawler pretty soundly in their fight on ESPN.
Why isn't he the current interim champion? What happened?
He was the interim champion 2 years ago.
Okay.
Like the actual title has been defended since he became interim champion, beating Rafael dos Anjos.
And this is because Tyron Woodley was out of action?
Yes.
Okay.
He was linked to a fight with Tyron, couldn't take it. He wound up having nasal surgery for a deviated septum. They gave the shot to Usman. When that fight took place, they stripped him of the interim belt. He keeps it around as a prop. and to annoy people. And in fairness to Colby, it works. Usman is the champion. He is the undisputed champion. There is no actual interim champion. Again, Colby just carries it around.
Okay. In short, Colby Covington was the interim champion. He never lost it. It got stripped because the actual belt got defended.
Yes.
Got it.
You also have Jorge Masvidal out there in the world right now, riding one of the biggest hot streaks you can with back-to-back knockouts. He knocked out Darren Till in the second round.
And then he took Ben Askren's soul.
That was so great. And I don't let me be clear, I don't dislike Ben Askren. But Jorge Masvidal with the flying knee and then the mockery after all the... And then another credit to Ben Askren. When people got on his case about it, about him being him, a few other people came to his defense and said, guys, it's really hard to fight in a cage. You don't need to pile on. Askren's actual response to this was, I probably deserve it.
I watched...
when someone else mocked him on Twitter by saying, hey, you remember that time you got by Jorge Masvidal? Actually, I don't.
I like Ben Askren. I mean, his Bellator fights made GSP fights look like Hobbs and Shaw in terms of action. But, sorry, Ben Askren's Bellator fights were a string of some of the most boring fights ever. But I watched this fight against Jorge Masvidal, and he really, when he went in thinking, I'm just going to tackle this guy. I'm going to tackle this guy, and I'm going to work submissions, and I'm going to win because he won't be able to get me off of him. And he fucking ate a flying knee for his trouble. That
was so great. And then again, not because I dislike Ben. I don't dislike Ben Askren at all. I have a deep appreciation for his game, and I do want to shout out, there's a multi-part YouTube study on his game by BJJ Scout that if you may not still be entertained by him, will at least give you an appreciation of what he does.
I don't know what he did in one. He was there for a few years, and maybe he was...
I'll tell you what he did. He won a lot of fights and made a lot of money.
He won in Bellator, too. I think he left Bellator as the welterweight champion.
Yes, because he and Bjorn Remdy did not get along. Dana White didn't want him in the UFC. He went to one, made a lot of money, won a fair number of fights.
But did he do the same thing he did in Bellator, where he just smothered a guy and didn't actually finish anything?
He didn't finish a whole lot, but he did finish more fights. He was fighting a lower level of opposition as well. He also refined his game a bit. When he was in Bellator, he did a lot of trying to play the jiu-jitsu and wrestling mixed game. In one, he kind of went, screw the jiu-jitsu. I'm a wrestler. So he would, instead of trying, there's a bunch of positional choices that you make in jiu-jitsu and that a lot of people make in MMA because so much of the scoring hierarchy in MMA is predicated on sport jiu-jitsu. He kind of went nuts to that. I don't need to take your back and let you try to explode into me and lose position. I can take a ride position and just pummel you while you do nothing because you're helpless here. So again, he refined a lot of it. I mean, Khabib does a lot of some of the tactical stuff that Ben Askren does. Khabib does very, very well as well, and is kind of adopted. So if you want to see a lot of Askren's game amped up, look at what Khabib does when he just smashes people.
Well, we'll talk about Khabib a little bit later, possibly, as he's got the next pay-per-view. But in the meantime, as Stipe Miocic walks to the ring, now Dan Cormier,
the dulcet tones of Machine Gun Kelly.
Yes, the man who played Tommy Lee in the Dirt Motley Crue movie on Netflix. One of my favorites of this year.
I hate you.
Whatever, baby. You don't have to like me. You just have to love me. Listen.
Not either.
My question to you is this: Dan Cormier, this is his last fight, by hook or by crook?
I don't know. He's about 10 pounds lighter here than he was for his first fight with Stipe. I think he's got in his head maybe one more fight with John Jones.
Why?
Okay, hold on. Because Daniel Cormier, like all high achievers in the field of athletics, is pathologically competitive.
No, and I get that. And I get that losing to John Jones incessantly
twice.
Sticks in your craw. Well,
The only man to beat him.
And look, and I get all of that. Look, if I'm Dan Cormier and I've risen to the heights that he has in combat sports, I don't want to go out having had that one and only, loss. The only losses in my career be to one guy. I want to try and beat him. I try a third time. He also tried the business with Brock Lesnar, but Brock Lesnar only uses UFC to leverage more money out of old man McMahon. So,
well, in fairness, if old man McMahon does not capitulate to Lesnar's desires, he's happy to come back to the UFC.
Yes, for just sacks and sacks of Scrooge McDuck gold.
I mean, look, and I get why Cormier wants that fight. It is the best payday for the lowest risk. That fight is a walk in the park for Daniel Cormier.
Yeah, Brock Lesnar dies is what happens. I don't want Brock Lesnar fighting in the UFC again. There's, unless he's going to fight at lightweight, except that he doesn't have to cut weight. In other words, he fights lightweights. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
I still think Khabib might take him.
Well, Khabib is a different story.
I think Tony would take him. I think Tony Ferguson would take him.
I think Tony Ferguson.
Well, no, hang on. They would never fight. They're actually buddies.
Yeah, I was going to say I think Tony might have wanted to take him back when he was coaching the Ultimate Fighter, Brock Lesnar, but those were the days of yesterday. All right, so but I've heard rumor. That's why I brought it up. I've heard rumor that Dan Cormier, while he might be making some noise about John Jones, that he is looking. I mean, they use him on the commentator desk a lot.
He's good at it.
He's very good. I personality-wise, I like him more than I like what's his face there.
That's because your taste in commentators is about as good as your taste in movies, but I digress.
You just like to take those digs at me, don't you? Who am I thinking of? What Dominic Cruz,
who is on commentary this evening and doing a tremendous job.
I mean, look, as an analyst, he's fine. I don't particularly enjoy his voice. What can I tell you?
You like look, and I don't mean this as a slight to you. You like the joviality and occasional stupidity that Daniel Cormier brings to commentary.
I like Mauro Ranallo.
I don't dislike Mauro. Come on. You liked Mike Goldberg. Let's not.
I used to enjoy making fun of Mike Goldberg. Me and my buddy Paul elbowing each other and just yelling out Goldberg 5,000 lines. The beautiful Brittany.
There were a few of them. I hate Goldberg so much. Minor dovetail.
What's he doing?
He commentates for Bellator.
Does he really?
He and Big John McCarthy are the worst commentary duo in combat sports history.
Where did Jimmy Smith go? Because I've seen him.
He went to the UFC for a while. They decided not to renew his contract. He has another thing, I think, on either Showtime or ESPN now.
Yeah, I thought I heard him.
He's got a radio show.
I thought I heard Jimmy Smith somewhere else, like commentating on something. I don't know if it was The Zone or something else, but
you might have heard Sean Wheelock commentating on like Bare Knuckle, and just mistaken it for Jimmy Smith. I don't know.
That's entirely possible. I think one of my old training folk for the short time I was training in jiu-jitsu was actually got a fight in Bare Knuckle. She started off in Invicta, and she went to boxing, and now I think she's doing Bare Knuckle.
Because if you're not good enough to fight in Invicta, and you're not good enough to actually box, you go to Bare Knuckle.
Yup.
That is the career trajectory of professional fighters now. If you're not a wrestler or a jiu-jitsu guy, if you like to strike in MMA but you're not all that good, or you're washed up, you try boxing but you suck at it because boxers actually know what they're doing. Hey, bare knuckled. They have a crappy rule set that's not actually enforced properly that will facilitate me doing MMA things.
So, a couple things about that. One, they just signed Bigfoot Silva. I could not be more excited.
He's never going to fight.
Two, after watching the last bare knuckle fight that was on the Fight app, which was in Biloxi, Mississippi, I believe, I've told my wife that I want to get in a little bit better shape, not much better shape, but I at least want to be able to do a fair amount of exercise without being winded, and I want to be a bare knuckle fighter when I grow up.
That is a terrible idea.
She didn't agree with it either. But after I saw the level of competition in bare knuckle, I'm like, I'm pretty sure I can
hold
do that.
on. I'm not denying you could be successful. I'm still saying it's a terrible idea.
43-year-old out of shape man with
you
2
would
bouts
not
of cancer.
You would not be the oldest person on any given bare knuckle fight card.
Are you shitting me?
Bigfoot Silva's older than you are.
That's true. You're not wrong about that.
Chris Lieben, I think, is older than you are.
Oh, that's fucking hilarious. All right, we are about... You wanted to do a minor dovetail. Get it out of your system here before we actually start this fight.
Again, the worst commentary booth in the history of combat sports. Big John McCarthy and Mike Goldberg. All they do is tell stories about fighters.
You know what's funny?
I heard this line: the actual cage could catch on fire, and neither of them would acknowledge it.
Well, you know what's funny? We had Victor Cocado of All About Life do commentary for the last PBC card on Fox, and when I shared the link to the Fight Line on Facebook fight today that was taking place at the Dropkick Murphy show in Springfield, he started listening to the commentary, and he texted me, and he was like, wow, we do a better job of this. They're not talking about the fight. It's like the fight isn't even happening.
I mean this in all seriousness. As soon as you step down from the top-tier level of combat sports commentary, it's crap. It's almost... And again, you might find a couple of guys who are good for your regional show, and they're okay for your regional show. But even that's a little bit few and far between. Commentary is hard to do. And, I mean, as evidenced by the fact that there's so few people who actually do it properly. It's hard. It is difficult to do, and when you get anything that isn't absolute top shelf, and even some of the top shelf guys has people on tenure who are just kind of hanging around, it's a hard thing to do.
I agree. I think it's the current group of guys in the UFC than us.
I'm trying to come up with a counter argument. Hang on. Okay, hang on. On occasion, the PFL guys are okay. Because they tend to have, like, Randy Couture, Boss Rutan, and I think Michael Chiavello. So, again, you get a few decent ones, and, like, Bellator's off-brand, because I think Mauro does work for them on occasion.
Does he really?
He used to. I don't know if he still does.
Gosh, with all that wrestling work, he does, and
he only does NXT.
And I think he's also doing Showtime, isn't he, still?
A little bit.
On the occasion that they have a card? I know they've got one coming up in Oklahoma.
He does I think he does on occasion do stuff for them. He does some kickboxing on occasion. Like, the man works.
So there's a Ryzen show coming up at O'Dark early in the morning after this. You have any interest in that, or you not really?
You mean like tonight?
I believe so.
No. I mean, find a start time, man. I don't care.
Check the Fight app.
I don't have it.
Oh.
How many times do I have to tell you I don't have a phone?
Okay, I will. When we're done with this, I will tell you when the Ryzen show starts.
Because, I don't know. I mean, you need content, and I hate myself, so who knows?
Oh, no, that's $22. I'm not paying for that. All right, here we go with our main event heavyweight title fight. Because, boom, heavyweights.
Mean face DC.
All right, we start off with a leg kick from Stipe. He's circling to his right as well. Dan Cormier just kind of taking the
That's
center
actually
of the
a
cage.
good call from him. He really doesn't want to move into Cormier's right. So if Stipe is moving to his own right, a good way to circle, especially if he wants to start working the body.
Dan Cormier landed a leg kick. Throws another one. Gets checked. Return fire from Stipe Miocic.
Don't you have Croatian ancestry? Shouldn't you know how to pronounce his last name properly?
It's not Miocic.
I don't know. I'm just giving you grief.
I'm pretty sure I'm doing this right. God damn it. I'm looking forward to doing commentary with you for the Andrade Zhang card and mispronouncing all the Chinese Chinaman names.
You're going to make my ears bleed, and I will have been awake for like 8 hours starting at 1 in the morning. I might not even... I don't plan on sleeping for that, actually. I'm just going to stay up.
That's probably the best way to do it. So Dan Cormier is really working that lead leg on Stipe Miocic.
Yeah, both men, I think, are in this fight for the long haul this time around. After the quick finish in the first one, they're like, okay, we're going to be fast, we're going to be lean, and this is going to go for a while.
Good left hook there from Cormier. There's a small part of me that wants Derek Lewis to run into the cage and hit Stipe with a chair.
I hate you so much for that. First of all, what makes you think Derek Lewis can run?
Maybe rappel from a helicopter like Sting. All right, Dan Cormier. I'm making myself laugh. Dan Cormier goes for a single leg.
I'm sure at least one person listening is laughing.
He's got the single leg. He lifts up Stipe. He's got him draped over his back, and boom, slams him down. After, I don't know, I thought he was going to suplex him there for a moment. He had him up so long.
We had the old beach break drop earlier in this event. You don't know what that is because you don't watch Japanese wrestling. I don't know why I waste my references.
Yeah, that was an utter waste on me. But I did watch the conclusion of the A block finals. Finally, I decided that I have decided that maybe Ibushi might be my new favorite wrestler.
Wow, you're only like 8 years behind everyone else on Earth who watches wrestling.
I was hoping for 10. Dan Cormier now working from half guard. Stipe Miocic's half guard. Stipe Miocic utilizing some wrist control, trying to control Dan Cormier's head, prevent him from getting an advantageous position while on top.
The battle for head position between these two is going to be really interesting, especially given how high-level wrestlers they are.
Stipe pushing on Dan Cormier's head, trying to prevent him from working to either a mount or a side mount. Full mount or a side mount. Dan Cormier is working punches to the body now, trying to get Stipe to open up and let him pass. Go ahead.
I mean, if you're here, you may as well do something with it. And Cormier's top game is phenomenal when he gets to use it.
So, talk to me about covering someone's mouth like that.
It's just kind of a... And when I say dirty, I don't mean illegal. I mean, like, nasty thing to do.
Mm. But perfectly legal, huh? Just covering up a man's mouth?
Yes, it is.
How about frontal chokes? That's, you know...
I apologize to anyone who's offended by this, but grow a pair? You mean a rape choke?
Trying to avoid that term, but yes.
They're listening to us, man. A front
I've been relatively well behaved tonight. Thank you very much.
Yes, we both have, but we also know our audience.
It's true. Stipe just landed a head kick from the back, by the way.
For the record, no, you are not allowed to do the old two-hand front choke. It's also not a very good technique to begin with.
No, just curious. I mean, as you know, when you've got the guy on his back like that, I mean, I know you can drive your forearm into the face. Oh, we might see a stoppage here as Stipe Miocic is being rode on the back by Dan Cormier, who's just laying in punches. Now, Stipe's covering up, and Dan Cormier kind of looked at the referees like, are you going to stop this or not? And they were like, no, he's defending himself. Keep fighting, babe. Stipe stands up. He's trying to go for a double, but Dan Cormier blocks it. And the round is over. Easy round one for Dan Cormier. I don't even know what to tell Stipe Miocic at this point if you're in his corner.
Okay, get your jab going. Because he's not jabbing all that much. You also want, again, get your jab going. Get your footwork moving. Get in and out a little bit. And start working the body.
So one of the things I saw from Cormier in that round was he was laying in those leg kicks, and then Stipe started to throw checks. Now, if Dan Cormier can get his dynamic moveset going, he throws that leg kick, Stipe goes to check, immediately shoot for a single, you're going to be taking out a one-legged man.
That's the thing that happens a lot. So yeah, again, Miocic, you want your jab going, be a bit more active. You also want to, again, try to get in and out a bit more effectively. He's much taller and he's got a good reach advantage. You don't need to be fighting in the proximity that he is.
Good stiff left from Stipe starts off the round two. of this 5-round affair.
I mean, again, Miocic has the best jab at heavyweight. One of the best jabs in the sport, in all reality. And again, it struggles a bit against some of the guard work that Cormier uses, but it's still a great weapon. Yeah, Miocic never got out of first gear in that whole first round.
No, he did not. He was pretty stifled by Dan Cormier. Good knee there from Stipe. Stipe circles, lands a right, follows with a knee.
And this is more Stipe's kind of fight. Again, a little bit in and out, longer, sharp, crisp boxing combinations. I'm still surprised he's not going to the body because, again, Cormier doesn't defend it very well and has been susceptible to body work.
They keep grabbing each other's hands.
Yeah, they're trying to clear punching lanes while at distance.
All right.
You can see Cormier's mummy guard here in full effect. His arms are out. Muhammad Ali coined the phrase talking about, I believe it was George Foreman, just having your arms out like the mummy monster from the old Universal horror movies. Mm-hmm. And it does disrupt so many punching lanes that it's not even funny. It's deeply effective if all you're doing is boxing.
A good uppercut from Cormier stuns Miocic. He walks through it, though. Resets. Yeah, I see what you're talking about now, about the mummy guard. And it's now opening up some punching opportunities for Cormier, but Stipe Miocic returned fire, and it looks like he shook up Cormier just a bit.
Miocic can crack. He's got some power.
Left there from Dan Cormier. I want to see Cormier instead of insisting on striking with this guy, take him down, or at least attempt to. I know Stipe Miocic's wrestling is no joke either, but I'd like to see him utilize the clinch a little bit more like they are now. Stipe turns it around and backs Cormier into the fence, which again, Cormier may just be playing possum a little bit to get himself into an advantageous grappling position. What do you think about Cormier's gas tank in this fight so far?
These two have a pretty serious pace for heavyweights. I mean, these are 230-pound men, and look at what they're doing. This is... You expect that... I mean... Paulo Costa and Yoel Romero gassed out at a pace a little bit less than this, weighing 20 pounds less.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm not getting a good sense of Cormier's gas tank. And now he's starting to be a little bit more active, but I kind of thought he was breathing with his mouth open there for a moment.
I think he does that a lot intentionally anyway. Mm-hmm. He just does, because it's a more efficient means of getting oxygen. I mean, Dominic Cruz famously breathes rather heavy through his mouth anytime he's given space just to get more oxygen into his body. So it's a lot more about his posture and how he's moving than just the breathing methodology.
Cormier doing the old drop hands and punch from your waist method of boxing.
Again, a lot of that's his guard. He just wants his arms out, disrupting your punching lanes, and that means he kind of swings from odd angles.
Cormier's done a fairly good job of laying in those strikes on Stipe's face. Good uppercut there from Dan Cormier.
I'm a little bit surprised at how effective Miocic's uppercut has been this fight. He's tagged Cormier with that a few times.
Very back and forth round this one has been. The first one was clearly Dan Cormier's round, but this one's a little bit harder to score.
I'm actually leaning towards Stipe at the moment. I mean, he's been hit a few times, but he's done a lot of good volume work, and he's not been hurt.
He just got his bell rung, right? But looks like he got hit behind the ear. Cormier really effectively using his uppercut this round.
Yeah, I don't know why Miocic is ducking. It's when they're clinch breaking in particular. Miocic winds up ducking and Cormier's landing.
That was a terrible kick from Stipe. Good kick from Dan. Good counter left from Miocic. Very back and forth affair.
Again, his jab is real. Miocic's jab is much more effective as this kind of goes on.
So I would tend to agree with you. I would say they're 1-1 right now.
Yeah, Cormier closed strong in that round, but he gave up like the first 2 minutes. And even the last, 3, he was not winning by a wide margin.
So I'm wondering if this is purposeful. If he's just pacing himself. Figures as this goes
Could
into
be.
deep water, Stipe will start to gas and he'll have more opportunities to finish the fight. But, take a round off early, win it back the next round. I'm almost willing to bet Dan Cormier gets more aggressive in round 3.
Yeah, he does a little bit of I think he's going to do a little bit of the old Jose Aldo thing, where he knows he only has to win the odd-numbered rounds. And that's not a joke. Like, really, to win a fight, you only have to win one more round than your opponent, by one more point than your opponent. And if that one round comes down to you landing one more punch, who cares? You won.
Only the people that bought the tickets.
They already paid. Sucks to be them.
All right, round 3. We begin with
Cormier's a little busted up. Not a lot, but a little bit.
Yeah.
That jab is starting to get there.
He's got some scratches and some blemishes on his face. Oh, good right hand from Stipe. Knocks Dan Cormier back. He didn't like that at all.
Yeah, Miocic isn't going to necessarily stop a moose, but he'll stop a good-sized animal if he gets to land on you clean.
Dan walks into a straight left, and Stipe goes for a takedown. Nearly gets his head taken off in the process, but God bless him, he tried. More of that mummy guard there from Dan.
It's an effective tool at disrupting boxing. It's just not as effective when you have to kick or elbow or worry about your body.
So Stipe's taking some damage to his eyes. I mean, like when Dan's hit him now with a series of lefts, they've all hit him. They look like they've all targeted that left eye. Right eye.
It's been swelling. They've been working on it between rounds, so good targeting by Cormier.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of times Stipe's been hit now. He's kind of like twitched in his nose and his eyes. Trying to shake it off. Dan's starting to his throat.
No, it's Miocic's left eye, because it's the right hand that's been landing.
Stipe goes for a takedown via trip. Not effective.
Oh, I see what you mean. No, sorry. Yeah, that left hook. That was a good one.
And they are clinched up against the fence. Now, right here, we need to see Dan work for some underhooks, dig in, and put this guy on his back. Though it looks like he's trying to get some air. Do you think this opportunity is Stipe is leaning on him? Knows he's not really... I mean, it doesn't look great to the judges to have your back against the fence, but he's not really in any danger here.
If you're not comprehensively getting mauled or outworked, if you're not worried about your gas tank from the other guy leaning on you, that's the third time Miocic has gone for that foot sweep out of the clinch. That's tricky. I'm not surprised he's looking for some kind of takedown, because Cormier on his back, I mean, don't get me wrong, getting him there is a Herculean feat in the professional ranks accomplished only by John Jones. I think Gustafsson might have got him down very briefly once.
All right, Stipe circling the cage now, exchanging in bits and pieces with Dan Cormier. Dan Cormier again. That left. It's giving Stipe fits.
Well, Stipe's right hand is historically low. Like, he tends to carry that a bit on the low side, so that does expose him to the left hand of Cormier.
Kick to the body from Cormier.
Neither man is really committed to body work the way that I think.
I was just thinking that. I'm like, why aren't they working? Neither one's working the body. And I'm wondering if do you work a body, that's as stout and soft as Dan Cormier's? I mean, is that something?
Hey, look, both John Jones and Gustafsson had success going to his body. And sure, he's up at heavyweight now, so there's not as much of a weight cut, but the general principle is still there. At least test it.
So Stipe actually just got a takedown. And for a moment there, he actually had an opportunity to work on Dan, but Dan escaped and got back to his feet again. They're clinched up against the fence. Stipe is looking for another takedown. I don't think he wants to stand with this guy anymore. I think he's had about enough of this.
I mean, he's also aware of the damage he's taking.
That's what I mean. I think he's taken now enough damage to the face and head. This is only going to get more swollen up as the fight progresses. I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe it's time to change tactics here. Like, I don't think he's going to win a submission battle on the ground. But he takes less punishment to the face. And at this point, it's about surviving. Because what he's in danger of if this continues is that if Dan Cormier really piles on the punches to the eye area, he's not going to be able to. He's not going to be able to get to the end of this fight because his eyes are going to swell.
Yeah, it's a real consideration. Your defensive responsibilities. I'm going to start taking issue with whoever did the reach measurements for these guys because Miocic has longer arms, but they are not it's not at all by the length that was indicated.
It was a little fun exchange there. Dan kind of Matrix level bent back, evading Stipe's punches. He
does that a lot too. He does a lot of bending at the waist, and if Miocic is clever, he can capitalize, similar to how Weidman beat Anderson Silva the first time.
He's taken a lot of punishment to the upper nose and eye area. I think he's having some difficulty keeping focus. Yeah,
cardio's about to become a pretty serious issue too for both of these guys
as we move into the championship rounds. Yeah, for those of you who've never had the opportunity to be punched in the eye, it not only hurts, but there's difficulty getting your focus afterwards. The more you do it,
hang on, I have to think about this. I think I'm going to give that round to Miocic.
You think so, eh?
I don't know. That's a tough round.
I don't know. I'm leaning Cormier for that one.
I can. You know what? This is my coverage. I get to do what I want. I'm calling it 10-10.
Terrific.
So we have a score of 29-29 draw overall.
I would not throw things across the room if that's what this actually was. If this was
again, we got
fight.
We have if that comes out as a draw after 3, that's potentially fair. That third could go either way.
Mm-hmm.
That really could.
On the Radulich scorecard, I'm giving it to Dan Cormier.
Fair enough.
2-1. As we move here into round 4, not a whole lot of action going on, though. Stipe stalking Cormier, and Cormier's backing into the fence. Cormier's lost a step in his footwork.
Yeah, look at his feet. He's bringing them together before stepping. That's a big no-no in proper footwork. You never want your feet together like that. It's a bad thing.
Yep. As I've taught my son, nice wide base, or I'm going to knock you and anyone else you fight right over. You don't stand there like a statue.
Yep. Stipe's cardio might be the difference maker because he's gone 5 hard rounds before.
I don't know how satisfying it would be for Stipe to win back the title by decision against Dan Cormier.
I don't think he cares.
I don't think he cares. I'm sure he'll take the belt any way he can get it. But, and certainly if this is going to be Dan's last fight, I'd rather go.
Okay, I'm gonna throw this out there.
Mm-hmm.
If Stipe wins, they do a third fight. They will absolutely make a trilogy out of this if Miocic wins this fight.
Fair enough. Did you ever see Dan Cormier fight in Strikeforce?
A couple of times.
Other than the heavyweight stupid Grand Prix they did?
Come on, that was great. I love his fight with Josh Barnett.
Just the whole way the whole tournament worked out.
Well, okay, sure. There was some there were some extraneous issues, sure, but
hey, we have this giant marketing event for. Oh, he's lost.
In fairness, if Verdum hadn't absolutely shit the bed when he fought Overeem in the next round, might have still been okay.
You want to talk about things not going according to plan. All right, but people tuned in to hear us talk about the fight that's actually happening, so...
Hey, look, Miocic goes for the body a handful of times. Good for you, finally.
It only took 4 rounds. Way to go, Skipper.
I mean, again, I can get you maybe not wanting to give away everything you want to do in the first round, but in that second and third, he had opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's got some digging punches there to the body.
He's really, he's going for that this round. Miocic is really targeting that liver.
Yeah, he is. He's trying to drop Dan with a body shot. Problem is, he's not following it up with anything. It's one body shot, and then he backs off again.
You don't want to get caught up in too much exchanging right now.
No, but combinations would be nice.
Yes. But it's also MMA. Combinations are a rarity. It's why guys who throw them are so successful.
The sport's been around for 20-plus years. Evolve! Evolve!
Oh, don't give me that. You absolutely know it has.
Nice straight right there from Stipe. Dan getting a little aggressive now, losing a bit of patience here. Knows the clock is winding down. He has to do something this round.
He does not like those body shots, and he knows he's not going to take as many when he's going forward.
Well, we might see a finish here. Stipe, and we do. Yes. Stipe hit him and shook him up. He followed up and followed him for a kill, and now we're river dancing. Please don't do that, sir.
No. Do it more.
No. Oh, how much does your life suck if you're Dan Cormier right now? Stipe Miocic is your new world heavyweight champion.
You know what? In all seriousness, Stipe is the best UFC heavyweight champion ever. He's now regained it. He is numerically the most successful.
Did he ever fight Overeem?
Yes, he knocked him out.
Yeah, that was the Cleveland show with shitty CM Punk, right?
Yes.
I love Stipe Miocic. He's one of my favorite fighters in the UFC, has been, and not just because we share Croatian ancestry. Maybe that's why. But
I'm sure that's part of it, but I will accept that there's more to it.
So here's the replay.
That was
digging
beautiful.
Body shot.
See why I wanted him to do that earlier?
Mm-hmm. All right, so yeah, it was right hooks to the face. He loaded him up. Boom, 1, 2. That second one nearly blacked out Cormier. Cormier pretty much dropped all his defenses, and at that point, Stipe Miocic just laid in rights and lefts until Dan Cormier crumbled like so much toast.
Yeah, he knocked him out cold along the fence. That's a little bit of a late stoppage.
You think so?
Look at it again. Look at when he does the stanky leg relative to when the ref actually steps in.
His hands were up, though. I mean, I would have thought his hands would drop from
really only part of it.
Okay. I mean, I'm not going to argue with you about body mechanics and unconsciousness.
Okay, hold on. I'm not claiming that that's the worst stoppage in the world. It's not. But that could have been stopped a little bit sooner.
Look, it wasn't Brock Lesnar fucking what's-his-nuts before Velasquez.
Shane Carwin?
That's the one.
God, that's such a beautiful sequence. He stuns him with the left to the body, rights to the cage to back him up. Then he just unloads. Yeah, look at him. He does the stanky leg. He's out.
Okay.
Oh, that's such a beautiful body shot.
All I was calling issue with was I don't think it was as late a stoppage as you think.
Okay, again, not egregious. When I say a little late, I'm being very... Yeah, there's like 3 or 4 punches when he's no longer in a position to defend himself. He's not out cold, but it's like, okay, you're here, you're not moving to defend.
They give these guys, especially in title fights, a little bit of leeway because you never know, and you don't want to stop these things too soon. It's a man's title on the line. So I'm fine with it.
And bad Irish jig dancing. You know what? Good on you, Stipe.
All right, so we've had our post-fight interviews. Robert, did Dan Cormier say anything of interest regarding what the next step for him is?
Cormier might be done. Again, I think the UFC would try to do a trilogy. I think Cormier might be interested in that. Again, he's a very competitive guy. So he's going to want it back. So we might see that come to pass. He might also decide, you know what? I've got broadcasting gigs. I coach wrestling. I've got all these other things. I'm 40 years old. I'm one of the best to ever do it. I don't need to get punched in the face anymore. And you know what? In all seriousness, God bless Daniel Cormier, because that man has done incredible things. I don't say he's one of the best to ever do it lightly, even though I struggle to really engage with his fights on a lot of levels. I acknowledge his greatness, even if I don't react to it viscerally the same way I do to others. Not a knock on him, just stating reality. He is absolutely one of the best, and if he does decide to go out, he has nothing to hang his head on. He has nothing to hang his head about, man.
No, he's had a Hall of Fame career. There's no doubt about that. Absolutely. I certainly appreciate Dan Cormier's effort. I thought he had every chance in the world to win this fight. He certainly did the first time. So, who knows?
Oh, for the record, I believe Ryzen 18 starts about now.
Yeah, I just got the alert. I thought it was roughly 1 a.m. when it was starting. It's $23. I'm not... No. I want to go to bed. I got the CPAPs calling. All right. So that is our watch-along alternate commentary coverage of UFC 241 Cormier versus Miocic 2. All in all, your 50 words or less 10-cent review of this pay-per-view. What'd you think?
I don't really do event of the year kind of thing for, but if I did, this would be featured pretty highly. There's one other one from earlier this year that I said was event of the year so far. It was a bunch of fights that were good, that were relevant. It wasn't, and we got that here. I mean, in all seriousness, what are we going to complain about? You have Stipe Miocic and Daniel Cormier, a perfectly acceptable heavyweight title fight, the two best heavyweights in the world. And yeah, they suffered from fatigue and it got a little bit sloppy at times, but that's kind of par for the course. You had a good fight. It was engaging. You had a good finish. You had Diaz and Pettis, which was action as anticipated. I mean, I don't think there's a boring Nate Diaz fight. Costa and Romero was a heck of a brawl. Yusef and Benitez was only 4 minutes, but it wasn't a bad 4-minute fight. And then, Brunson and Hynek was a little bit But, one on a 5-fight main card, I'll take that.
Absolutely. All right, so the next time we're doing any kind of coverage is actually next weekend. Good. I could actually complete that sentence. Next weekend, myself and Robert, he doesn't have to do MMA coverage, so I'm hornswoggling him against his will into doing boxing coverage with me. It's going to be Sergey Kovalev versus Anthony Yarde on ESPN Plus for the WBO light heavyweight title. We'll just be doing the main event of that one. Pat Mullen and I will also be doing a review for NXT UK TakeOver Cardiff on August 31st. We just dropped a Lost in Space review. You can go ahead and check that out, as well as all of our other TV, movie, comic book, and heavy metal review shows in the archives. We've got a Patreon page. That's patreon.com/Radulich, Radulich, where you can find our archived watch-alongs and any watch-alongs in the future Screaming Boy shows, as well as archived ones. So, give us $1. Get some, get some podcasts of us making, cracking wise while watching movies like Godzilla and Jupiter Ascending and whatnot. Robert, quick, tell them where they can find your written coverages and anything else you're doing.
If you want to see my written coverage of the same event, you can find it in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com. Sunday, on the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast, we'll be reviewing all of this action.
Which you can subscribe to that podcast on Podcoin. Why listen to Robert's MMA podcast for free when you can get paid? Or at all. When you can get paid to listen to him talk about MMA. And you can hear him and Jeff Harris, also of 411mania.com, spit and scream and argue with one another about the tiniest of minutia regarding MMA. Who would do that for free? Nobody! So why not get paid for it? Subscribe to the 411 Ground and Pound radio show on Podcoin. I finished your plug for you.
I noticed. I appreciate it.
The next Damn You Hollywood we're doing is in a few weeks. We'll be doing it. It'll be myself and Robert, obviously. Probably Alexis Hana and Jason Teasley.
Okay, that's 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, roughly, yeah.
Because next week on the schedule you have a TV party.
Next week is all Swamp Things. The following week is Krypton.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah, so it's just about 3 weeks away. We got Swamp Thing, Krypton, and then Damn You Hollywood. And I think it's the only Damn You Hollywood for. No, there's 2 Damn You Hollywoods because there's Rambo in September as well.
Oh yeah.
So you get a bit of a break from me, at least a break from me doing movie reviews. Good for you.
And we might do again the horror segment of the Damn You Hollywood community might get together and do a few others depending on the timing and the schedule. But
yeah, I sent you those dates. Well, folks, this has been our watch-along alternative commentary for the UFC pay-per-view 241, Miocic versus Cormier 2. For Robert of 401mania.com, we certainly appreciate him. He didn't have a stroke tonight. We're all very happy about that, so maybe we'll do more of these in the future. You'll find out just as soon as I do. For Robert Winfree, I'm Mark Radulich. Be well, be safe, and behave.